My name is Thomas, and I'm 25 years old. A few months back, I got a job at McDonald's. I already had a day job as a restaurant waiter, but I needed more money since I wanted to get my own apartment and move out of my parents' house. Finally, ironically, during the day, I was a waiter at a top chef restaurant, which served exquisite and exclusive fresh cuisine food. It was very expensive. Unfortunately, waiters weren't paid proportionally above average, but still not enough. All due respect towards you, other commoners who can't afford anything beyond Big Macs, double cheeseburgers, and chicken nuggets. In any case, I wasn't going to work at McDonald's every day. Well, in fact, I wasn't going to work during the days at all, since I was taking the night shifts. Most of the time, I was taking orders from people who were using the drive-through service, being served in the comfort of their own cars. The first weeks went by, and overall, it wasn't anything that I wasn't expecting. Even during the nighttime, I knew I had to attend a generous amount of customers. A few of them were sketchy, verbally aggressive, and men, while others were visibly drunk, which is the last thing you should be when driving a car. But I would say 60% of the people were easygoing and nice to serve. After a couple months, I got a customer that was definitely particular. It was a woman, maybe in her late 40s. She was good-looking with big blue eyes. She had a big smile on her face, short blonde hair. The woman was very nice and talkative. She even gave me a tip, which is not common. To be honest, she simply ordered a cheeseburger, a Coke, and a small bag of fries. So far, nothing weird about this. The thing is, the woman returned exactly 1 week later, but this time she looked very different, including her attitude. She was dressed like a gothic woman, including her makeup. She had skull-shaved earrings and a creepy look in her eyes, and a general cold and eerie expression on her face. It was like she was analyzing me and seeing me for the first time. Although I can't say she was rude, I was genuinely freaked out by her this time. She doubled her previous order. 2 cheeseburgers, 2 Cokes, and 2 small bags of fries, and no thank you and no tip. A few days later, as my McDonald's night shift came to an end, I was tired and anxious to get in my car and drive back home. The parking lot was almost empty except for 2 cars, one being mine, but there were 2 individuals there precisely, right next to my vehicle. Hello? Can I help you? I asked, a bit nervous as I approached them. Yes, mister, you most certainly can. A woman said. I was very surprised to see the same mysterious woman as I looked over the other figure. I almost froze when I saw it. It was the same woman, meaning there were 2 of them. They had to be twins. Of course, the one who was speaking to me was the nice, smiling woman, and the other, who was silent, was Gothic woman. What do you need help with? It's kind of late, I asked, trying to avoid showing my insecurity. Just look into my eyes, the smiling woman said, as she came closer to me. The woman started whispering some words for some strange reason. I couldn't stop looking at her big, bright eyes. I started to feel numb and then sleepy, and then I simply lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was tied up and lying on the floor. I think I was probably at their house. Irina, he woke up. The Gothic woman was staring at me, sitting on a chair. Ah, excellent. Hello, Thomas. The smiling twin approached, and was now speaking to me as if I was her best friend. What is this? What do you want? Money, take anything you need, just don't hurt me. I said, unfortunately, my good Thomas, our interests are exactly the opposite. We don't want money, we want to take your life. She answered, what? Why? I screamed. My name is Irina, and this is my twin sister, Olga. Symbolize the different bipolar planes of existence I represent. Order, light, and life. And Olga stands for chaos, darkness, and death. We sell to meet. And as you would expect, we don't get along very well. But once a year, there's a common ritual that we share, which serves both of our antagonist causes and different paths. The smiling woman said, being enigmatic and vague. You both need therapy. Just let me go. Please, I won't say anything. I shouted, "You will be set free soon enough." How does the order and chaos meet? By taking a life. Because life itself needs death in order to progress in time and space. So we are going to kill you, Thomas, and then we will mix your flesh with the hamburger meat. You understand the sacred meaning of this, right? The cycle of life and death. Your flesh will be feeding hundreds of homeless human beings, hence kin to the existence of their lives, while at the same time you will free the world of your own life. Irina's explanation was insane crazy. Let me out, help. I started to scream like a maniac. Just a few more moments. Thomas, embrace your place in the wonderful circle of life. Olga is coming with a knife. Irina said I could. Feel my heart beating inside my chest. I couldn't listen to my own breathing. I wasn't even shouting anymore. I saw Olga, the gothic sister, come closer with knife in hand. But then, the unexpected happened. Olga stabbed Irina in the throat. Irina's big eyes were surprised, his mind as she looked towards her sister. Olga spoke, "I'm so sorry. My sister, our partnership is over tonight. Chaos wins and rules alone. And you have to admit, you didn't see this one coming. Did you? That's why I always win." Irina felt and died within a few minutes before leaving. Olga whispered to me, "You were saved by chaos. Never forget this goodbye." Then the gothic sister left the next day. I was found by my colleagues, and they called the cops. I told them what happened and repeated my story to the police. Olga was never found. I guess she was right. Chaos always wins. The hunger to make some extra income drove me towards a part-time job at McDonald's, a few blocks from my house. It didn't cost me extra money to close from work as an editor in a publishing company and arrived for my night shift at the fast food place. So as long as I was willing to work without any complaints, they were willing to hire me. I convinced the manager to assign me to the night shift permanently, and it posed no problem whatsoever. My routine was always the same. Wake up each morning, cook, prepare for the day, and arrive at the publishing house by 8 a.m. once the clock struck 5 p.m. I rushed out and found my way to the fast food place after closing at 9 p.m. I trekked down the few blocks that came before the condo where I lived. The sad part, however, showed up, and how tired I was every evening. Of course, it wasn't easy for a person to spend more than 12 hours outside their home each day. If things went well, I hoped to make enough money to cover my debt within 2 years and then take a rest. But that drive didn't compensate for the stress that overwhelmed me every once in a while. Other times, I love the urge to cook or eat. Perhaps this could explain the indifference I felt. One night after closing, I was on my way home 2 blocks from my condo when I heard footsteps behind me. They were silent and subtle, almost like the person wanted me to notice them, but also didn't want me to. I didn't look back for a while, but when the perfect blend of the silent steps and darkness indulged fear in me, I turned almost as soon as I did. My eyes caught sight of a shadow. Whoever it was, he ran down the neighborhood, and my impulse caused me to run after him. When I got nearer to the end of the block without catching up, I turned back and chose to return home, but I found myself turning back to look and make sure that no one was following me. Hated the fear that little encounter planted in me when I got home. I double-checked my locks and shut all the windows. Even the windows in my room, I cuddled with fear in my bed that night, hoping against all hope that what I encountered earlier was nothing more than an expensive joke. My mind played on me. I slept. Off sleep must have erased the memory of the previous night's scare, because when I woke up the next morning, I'd forgotten all about the chase and the mysterious stalker. I followed my usual routine and got ready for work. By 8 a.m., I was at my desk in the publishing house by some minutes past 5 p.m. I arrived at McDonald's for my night shift. I didn't expect anything extra for the day. Customers trooped in and out as usual, but around 8 p.m., almost 3 hours after I arrived, I noticed a seat that was still occupied. I called the attention of one of the workers, and he agreed that the man who occupied the seat had been there even long before he arrived. It piqued my interest. Not because you looked homeless and shabby, but because every time I turned to look at the man, he looked away like he had been studying me the whole time. I decided to do something about the whole weird situation and report to my manager. But because we were near closing hours, he resorted to leaving him. My lazy-ass manager concluded that he would leave after the shop closed, and that he wouldn't hurt anyone, to be honest, on the call. It felt like he didn't want to be bothered with whatever he was doing that evening, so I let it slide true to what my manager said. Once the closing hour arrived, the man left without being cajoled. Although he didn't order one thing, I also left and started my journey back home. I wouldn't have remembered what happened to me last night. Not if it didn't happen to me again. I was not far gone when I heard the same footsteps behind me, slow and subtle, as though the person wanted to and also at the same time didn't want to be noticed. I turned sharper than I did the night before and didn't wait for the individual to run. I ran in their direction in the dark. A person was smart too. He took to his heels and hurried off ahead of me. I didn't catch up with him in the end. I have loathed. How tiredness had reduced me to the weakest version of myself. If it were any other day, or a day when I didn't have to work all day, I would have caught the man. But at least I was glad to have caught on to something. The person wasn't young, and they always ran in a zigzag manner the next day. When I arrived at McDonald's, I was surprised to see the man that lingered the previous day in the same spot again. Maybe if you didn't pester the customers with his eyes and mannerless drools, I would have left him, but he caused so much pain just by sitting there that I had to alert my co-workers. The man refused to budge. I saw the frustration in the eyes of all of us and decided to lend a helping hand. I had once volunteered at a refugee camp, and so I had some knowledge of handling weirdos. I spoke with the man, and as soon as I did, he reasoned with me and agreed to leave with just one clause. Please see me out. I nodded and followed the man as he exited the building. I shouldn't have laid my guard down, but how could I have known that he carried a dagger with him? We were barely outside when he retrieved his hand from his coat and thrusts the sharp tool into my stomach. I screamed and fell off the ground. My co-workers came to me while I watched the man run away in a zigzag manner. I should have known he was the stalker. Blood gushed through my stomach like an open tap, and I coughed. I wished with all my strength that it wasn't as bad as I thought, and that I wasn't dying. But my eyes closed, and my body surrendered to oblivion. Thankfully, I opened them again a few hours later. That's what the detective who stood guard by my side said. My surgery was successful, and I would be out of the hospital soon. I was at least grateful that I didn't end up dead, or worse, alive and handicapped. I asked about the man, and the detective assured me that he was caught and arrested. The detective said that the man confessed to having stabbed me, but he wasn't saying the reason, or his excuse didn't seem like it. The man had claimed that he only wanted to test his new knife, and he felt like I was the perfect prey. I was scared to hear something like that. I told the police about the stalking, and the evidence made me know the man was the same. He took my statement and assured me that the man would pay for his crime. I thanked him for his efforts. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. I still didn't give up my job at McDonald's. Even though I worked under constant fear, I had a mountain of debt to clear. Many students across the years at my school have often spread rumors about weird teachers. Well, the truth is that most of them were completely harmless, but having an odd stare, a freaky smile, or even talking to the wrong student was enough to have them deemed as creepy. By the cohort of students at my school, they were usually just a select few who would pretty much gossip about anyone and everyone. But when it came to teachers, they didn't hold back. There had even been cases of teachers getting fired because of the rumors, teachers who my older brother had been taught by years ago, saying they were some of the most wonderful people he had ever met, or so they had appeared. The problem with repeatedly getting teachers fired without reason was that when a teacher joined the school who had actual issues, the school would likely ignore any further complaints about them believing all the students to be spreading more rumors. Just for the sake of getting the teachers fired, this exact problem had happened to my year that had only just escaped from lockdown, and we were returning to a school we'd never been in before. Yet, we'd been a part of it for a full academic year. Now we were far too naive to be able to distinguish between teachers, which made identifying them difficult, making the first few weeks back a struggle. But after a while, we became used to them and them to us, and in one case in particular, far too close mourning. Everybody, my English teacher, Miss Hart, a woman of around 27 years of age, only a few years out of uni and fresh out of teacher training, was doing her usual morning greeting. "Morning, miss," we all shouted back. There was a general clamor of excitement as Miss had told us the day before that we were getting a new assistant to replace the old one, which had left due to his son getting cancer. A horrific situation for such a kind man that he had been to us. Our new teaching assistant arrived today. Are you all excited? Her cheerful tone delighted the class, and our faces twisted into smiles of joy as we all cocked our heads towards the door, ready to see the new TI. As we turned around to face the door, there were a couple of shocked gasps as many snapped their necks away from the door to face a man sat at a desk in the far right. His glass, tinted with the blue light flashing from his screen, he noticed us all looking at him immediately and lifted his head up to sync. With his eyes, he bore no expression of a smile as he looked around the room. Until his eyes fell on me, his solemn face suddenly morphed into a rather sadistic smile that stabbed into me like one tectonic needle, piercing through my heart. "Good morning, I look forward to working closely with you." Even Miss Hart slightly creeped out by his estranged movement and seismic glare. As he seemed to be directing his words only towards me, I was petrified, and it wasn't long before the terror escalated and Mr. Hollard grew near. "Morning, Harry. How'd you sleep last night?" It had been around 5 days since his appearance in the classroom, and since then he had consistently sat as close as he could to me in every lesson, with many lessons that came after break being sat down next to my seat, cutting me off for my friends, leaving me no choice but to sit next to him. He would plague me at first with questions about how I found the school, but then, soon enough, those questions began devolving into far more personal. One, "It was good. Thanks," I responded to one of his ominous queries with haste and straightened my neck out to face towards Miss Hart. It was beginning the lesson around 10 minutes. In the moment, we were given tasks to do the remainder for the first half of the lesson. He pounced once again. "So Harry got any plans this weekend?" His voice was incessantly beginning to sound almost intimidating as he peered down at my page, edging closer, pretending to examine my work. "I'm busy all weekend with my dad and brother. We're going clay pigeon shooting. I don't want to scare him off." I thought, "Oh, how fun. Bring me back some shrapnel, will ya?" He chuckled to himself for a moment, and then engaged his glare once more at my quivering eyes. I subtly nodded and tried to hold my focus to my work, doing my best to avoid eye contact with this creature of a man staring into my soul. "You want to know what I'm up to this weekend?" He stared at me, his mouth slightly ajar, waiting for my response with a foul grin. "No, sir," I tried to reply plainly, so he wouldn't delve into too much detail. I probably shouldn't have spoken at all. "I'm going hunting." "Yep, me. My shotgun and whatever." Damn creature finds itself in my way. I shivered at his disgusting habit. He wouldn't shut up about how much he enjoyed hunting, hiding from prey before pouncing, And most of all, he wouldn't stop discussing his 12-gauge shotgun. Hey, you want to see the shotgun? It's a real beauty. I have it in my car, following my instincts. I sprang up from my seat and beckoned this to let me leave for the toilet. I needed to get away from that freak. I had had enough of it. I swiftly made my way to the bathroom opposite and found a cubicle for me to sit down and try to take a few deep breaths before going back out and having to listen to that vile beast heckle into my ear about his guns, his hunting, his delirious lifestyle. My blood froze as I heard the door open with a loud slam coming from the door, smashing into the wall. Harry, I know you're in here. Come with me. I want to show you how, awesome my cool gun is. My nerves seized up in seconds, and I reactively hoisted my legs up off the floor so we couldn't spot them from beneath the stall doors. Harry, I'm getting impatient. Come out quickly before Miss realizes we aren't going to the toilet. I was utterly stricken with terror at this point, and I certainly wasn't gonna leave anytime soon unless he left me be. I heard footsteps slowly approach the cubicle door. It was him, that creature that come for me. And now a thin plastic door was all that held him back from me. His heavy breathing indicated that he was ready to break his way in, if he needed to, Harry. I said, come up. Please, can Mr. Hollard come to the head's office? Now the speakers boom down the corridors and through the closed bathroom door. That I've been saved. I'll be right back. Harry, don't you dare leave now. He laughed maniacally as he exited the room, and hearing the bathroom door close once more, I launched myself out of the cubicle and returned back to Miss Hart's class, far too afraid to try and speak out about what had just happened, and fear I would be deemed a liar, all because of the rumors spread around by the years before us. Some god must have been watching over me. However, as the next day I came into class, and Mr. Hollander was nowhere to be seen, and the same happened the next day and the day after, and so on until it finally clocked that Mr. Hollard was gone, whatever had gone down in the head's office. I will never know, but it saved me from whatever twisted plot he'd been using on me to try and get me to his car. I was terrified, but not yet scarred, though I never dared to interact with another member of staff I hadn't known for the rest of school. They even now aged 30, and I still can't even fathom talking to someone new, even at work. I would be too cautious. I wouldn't let anyone else come so uncomfortably close to me again. I wouldn't risk it. I'm too afraid. Welcome. This will be where you two are gonna stay for the next couple of days. We have amazing activities planned for you. Hope you're excited. Please go take a look at your rooms and see what you think you're over at Cabin 4. See you soon, Marquez. Our host returned to the staff. Shaq and my wife Elizabeth and I were left to explore our accommodation. Wow, beautiful, isn't it, Mark? You really paid for the whole thing. I felt slightly insulted by Elizabeth's remark, but considering just how poor we were, it wasn't a surprise she had expected a worse-off honeymoon. Luckily for the two of us, this place popped up as I was searching for honeymoon destinations abroad, and the prices were dirt cheap. It was strange that they were that cheap. Considering how luxurious the place appeared to be, the accommodation was located on one of the islands under the Solomon Islands area. The sea reflected the pure blue in the sky, and the water was clear enough to see the bottom. Only whilst on the shoreline we were staying on some kind of pier, further out into the sea. On the pier, there was a ring of cabins all around one large opening into the sea in the middle, and each of our cabins had a stairway leading down into the depths. Personally, I was marginally afraid of the sea. If you can't see the bottom, then how are you supposed to know what's down there? That I pushed aside my fears for Beth. She grew up on a British coastal town, so the sea was like a second home to her. Hence the reason why she loved the place so much. Don't worry, honey, I got us a special deal on the place, so money doesn't matter. Let's go. Look inside, shall we? She nodded eagerly and leaned in to kiss me. She giggled after and headed inside. I followed, mesmerized by both the cabin's beauty and baths. Oh my Mark, there's a back porch that has a stairway leading into the sea. That's so exciting. I'll be sure to go for a swim later tonight. I walked over towards her, admiring the crystal white bed covered in roses, with the rest of the cabin being covered in lavish furniture. Even a TV sat on the wall. I had no clue how they had any wires come out here, but however so, it was impressive for such a small price. Dear Lord, you can't even see the bottom. Beth, what if something's down there? I was shivering a little at the thought of something lurking beneath the wooden stairwell, waiting for a pair of legs to grace the platform, ready for whatever it was to latch on and devour them whole. Oh, don't be so silly, Mark. There aren't any sharks for another 3 miles out to sea, and sharks don't bother to come near resorts like this anyway, considering they hunt sharks around here. Herbert set me straight for a moment fine, but if you see a fin, get out immediately, and if you do go in the water, just let me know, so I can come check on you. I was worried about her. We only got married 3 days ago. I certainly didn't want to lose my wife within the first week of our marriage. Maybe we'll be together most of the time anyway, so it won't matter now. I'm hungry. Let's go eat, she said as we made our way outside the cabin, off towards the staff cabin to ask about food on our way. I looked at the circle opening to the sea in the center of the cabins. It adds a slight tin of red in it, and the water was only clear for a couple of meters before cutting off into the murky depths below. I was incredibly nerved by it, but hunger was our focus, so I snapped back into reality. Hey Marquez, we just came to ask about the food situation. Do we have to wait until dinner, or is there something we can eat? Now her eyes were lit up with hopefulness. Sorry, Mrs. Rochester, breakfast, lunch, and dinner are the only times food served. But luckily for you, dinner here is at 5 every day. So give us 10 minutes or so, and it'll be delivered straight to your shack that leaped into the air out of joy. And we thanked Marquez, then returned to our cabin awaiting the food. What do you think it'll be? Mark, Beth asked me excitedly. Well, as long as it's food, I don't care too much. But I have a feeling it'll be seafood. She chuckled momentarily as we sat down on the little table and chairs inside our cabin and awaited our food nervously. We spoke for 10 minutes before finally hearing a knock on our cabin door. We opened it, and a staff member stood there bearing 2 plates with a bowl on each. He handed them to us and said, "Shark fin soup, enjoy." He left immediately, and we sat down to eat. I've never had shark fin soup before, Beth stated as she picked up her spoon and began downing the liquid. Neither have I. I don't like the sound of it, I said, as I also began digging in. It wasn't terrible, but hearing how hunting sharks attracted more sharks inland towards the coasts, it terrified me. We didn't take long to eat. It was a thick substance which made it easier to consume, and soon enough we had left our empty bowls outside, ready to be collected, and both feeling tired, we hit the bed for a nap. I woke up hearing the sound of a scream from outside. The cabin. I sat up, looking around me wildly for Beth. Her sided bed had its covers flung off, and there was no sign of her. Anywhere around the cabin, the scream continued, and so I leapt out of bed, sprinting out the back of the cabin onto the porch to find where the screaming was coming from. It was pitch black outside, with the remaining bits of sunlight being sucked behind the horizon. There were a few lights dotted around the area, but there was enough light to see a velvet red liquid pool around the stairwell leading into the sea. No Beth blood and water nighttime sharks. Suddenly the scream once again arose from the water, and I could see Beth splashing around, screeching for help. I grabbed her arm and tried hoisting her up at first, but whatever great beast was pulling her from below restricted me from hauling her out. All of a sudden, the door behind me burst open, and in rushed Marquez, followed by several staff members who had heard the screams and had come to help. 2 of the staff members fortunately held harpoon guns and dove into the depths below. There was a moment of struggle as Beth wailed in agony, but then the resistance below had suddenly stopped, and we finally plucked Beth out of the water, though only what remained of her. Her entire left leg had been ripped off, and her right was badly wounded, with several teeth marked lining her calf and thigh. Marquez beckoned for one of the staff members to go and call some kind of ambulance service, which they did, and in 15 minutes a boat arrived at the docking area, and Beth's small body was hauled aboard. I went with her and we arrived at a small local hospital after 30 minutes or so of sailing. I held her palm and mine, tightly clutching onto her very life essence. "You'll be okay, Beth. I promise." I followed her inside the hospital but was restricted from entering the surgical room. There was a short period of time where I was stationed alone in the waiting room, and to my foul despair, the doctor came out and spoke the words I can never forget. "I'm sorry, sir. She's dead foreign." Working at McDonald's has ruined my life. I thought it would just be a way to save money for the future while I studied at my local college, but it turned out to be the thing that ripped my future from my grasp. It all started in the summertime. I was working the drive-through window, which is as mundane of a routine as anything else you can do at McDonald's. All the orders were passing through my hands and into car windows in one monotonous blur, just like any other day. But despite the sheer number of people that passed by me during that shift, there was one individual who stuck out. The driver of the vehicle she was in was nothing special, just her whipped boyfriend, but I remember her. She had this awful helmet-looking wig of ketchup red hair which just did not go with the rest of her style whatsoever. I tried not to stare. I looked up to the screen where the orders came through to see what they got. Her boyfriend got a Big Mac meal with a large Sprite, and she got a 10-piece McNugget meal with a large high C that may not seem relevant. But I only say this because I know for a fact that I did everything within my responsibility to make sure they got what they were supposed to. I handed over the drinks first. Then I held out the bag of food. I expected her boyfriend in the driver's seat to grab it, but instead she reached over and snatched it out of my hands, giving me this dirty, ravenous look as she did it. I see some weird things in the drive-thru, so that barely registered anyway. "Have a nice day," they sped off out of the drive-thru, and I thought I'd never see them again. I was wrong. The woman with the ridiculously red hair walked inside not a minute later. I saw her as I was grabbing a McFlurry cup from the front. She was standing with her hands at her hips, impatiently waiting to speak to a manager in a very evident manner. By the time I'd made the McFlurry, the manager was with her. I wasn't really paying attention, but I could see she was being nasty. For no good reason. I don't know what kind of day the manager was having, but he wasn't having any of this woman's attitude. They started screaming at each other. "You come into my establishment and you insult my employees. What the hell do you think you're doing in here? I ought to take you out back and rip your damn wig off, you piece of out of the corner of my eye." I saw her spit in the manager's eye, to which he slapped her in the face. He immediately regretted throwing hands and disappeared from the counter to go hide in his office. That's when the crazy woman went berserk. She started hollering at the top of her lungs, pushing stuff off the counter and throwing random objects into the kitchen. She threw over a cup of straws, spilling them all over the floor. What y'all think? I'm stupid. I think I can't count. I got a 10-piece, not a 9-piece maybe. I rip off one of your fingers and see how you feel about it. She was making an awful scene at that point. I couldn't help but look. Several of my co-workers went to the counter to try and calm her down or get her out of the restaurant, but she was inconsolable. She pulled on one of those plexiglass barriers that hangs in front of the cash register and hurled it towards somebody. It nearly stabbed their eye out. Still, the corner of the plexiglass sliced them in the temple, spurting blood all down their shirt. Let me see that witch that gave me my food. Come on, she needs a good beating. I realized she was talking about me, and that's when she jumped the counter. She locked eyes with me at the window and lunged, but she was caught by a small crowd of employees who got a hold of her and threw her out the door. But she came back several times. She came back, actually. Every time we thought she was gone, she would storm back in and throw something else at the people in the kitchen. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the manager came out and yelled at her. "The cops are on their way. You really want to throw your life away over one chicken nugget at that?" She disappeared. The cop showed up about an hour later, asked a few questions, and took a copy of the security footage. I thought she would eventually get fined a few grand or spend a few nights in jail, but we never got word that she'd been caught 3 or 4 months past. The season changed, and I pretty much forgot about the whole thing. Pretty much everyone moved on, even the cops. Then one day I was working the drive-thru again and I saw her.
She came back with her boyfriend and ordered the exact same thing. My heart sank to the floor. When she came up to the window, I recognized her immediately. She still wore that same awful red wig, but this time she was even more insane looking. She stared me down with this creepy, deranged smile like some kind of psycho would look at their next victim, but she didn't say anything. She just took her food and drove off slowly, looking at me through the window until they were out of sight. I thought about calling.
The cops, but I figured she would leave once she counted all 10 of her nuggets. It gave me a jolt, forcing me to remember her little rampage back in August, but after a while I wasn't thinking about it. Several hours passed and the sun went down. Then I was done with my shift right before I walked out the door. I remembered that I'd seen her that day, just as a precaution. I got out my keychain and clutched the little pink bottle of pepper spray. I'd had this thing since I was a sophomore in high school, about 6 years, so I was sure it was expired, but I figured it would be good enough. I pushed open the door and walked out with long, quick strides, headed for my car. Within seconds, I heard her walking behind me, racing to catch up with me, coming up so quickly that I was sure she was about to attack instinctively. I turned around and sprayed her straight in the eyes without bothering to linger. For any reason, I turned back and ran to my car as I fumbled with my keys looking for the unlock button. I looked back to the woman with the insanely colored hair. She was still standing, but she was staggering. I saw her wipe her eyes vigorously and spit on the ground. Then she looked straight at me. Her eyes were bloodshot, all the skin around them swollen and red and covered in thick tears. She bared her teeth like a rabid animal drooling. She screamed horridly, then charged at me unhindered. I pulled open the car door and jumped inside, locking it behind me. I thought I was safe, but before I could even calm my nerves enough to start my car, I saw a rock bashing into the window, smashing it like a wine glass. I shrieked, and then her hands came through the window. They grabbed me by the hair and yanked me through the door all over the shards of glass and dropping me on the pavement while still grasping at my scalp. She struck me in the face repeatedly, using her nails like claws, cutting my face and eyes, splitting my lip and scarring my cheeks. Yeah, this will teach you to disrespect me. You little punk, you gonna remember me. I don't know how long I was taking that for. I didn't fight back. I just clutched my car keys so she wouldn't steal it. Eventually, I heard my manager come out and start yelling. That's when the crazy woman dropped me to the ground and ran off, disappearing once again. And what's worse, the police still haven't found her. They don't care enough about me to go looking, I guess. But she ruined my life. I quit my job after that day, and I moved back into my parents' house. I even missed my college graduation because my face was so messed up. I'm too scared to go outside. I'm just worried that I'm going to run into her and she'll recognize me all over again. The customer begins to argue with a worker over her order. There is no audio, but witnesses told police that the customer became verbally abusive toward the staff. That's when the situation turned violent. The customer tried to get behind the counter and had to be pushed back out the door by other workers. When she couldn't get behind the counter, she started throwing things for the next 4 minutes. The woman with the red hair threw everything she could get her hands on over the counter. Wet floor signs, a trash can, plastic order numbers, another wet floor sign before leaving the restaurant. She grabs a big promotional sign and heaves it over the counter. Then she finally walks out. Oh my. Around the early 2000s, there was a high clown epidemic where multiple reports of people being chased by clowns was at an all-time high. Most were classified as pranks, but regardless of their intentions, it was downright terrifying. The next story was inspired by some footage of a Ronald McDonald terrorizing someone at McDonald'S. Here's what it looked like. Oh my God, have you ever wondered why they say, "Would you like fries with that?" After every meal you purchase, the offer seemingly comes up, despite you already order. I know why, and I'll tell you. But I need to give a disclaimer that the story isn't for the faint-hearted. This allegedly happened to a friend of mine. We'll call him John, and we'll call his roommate Brad. The fall semester was in full effect, and the pair had both studied at the same campus nearby. Their student housing. It was alleged that John moved in with Brad as he was originally from out of town and needed a place to stay for the following curriculum. Brad was
was known to not be the most pleasant individual to study around due to his constant guitar rehearsals for his rock band. This would cause John to always opt to study at a nearby McDonald's. It was usually the go-to place for students, as this particular franchise was a 24-hour establishment. The McDonald's was never packed, at least not during the night shifts, so finding a place to sit wasn't so bad. You would occasionally find a lawyer or two, and were guaranteed to find this one female bookworm.
Who would literally show up every night. John would always purchase a meal before study, giving him a plausible excuse to dine without feeling like he was loitering. Hello? Sir, welcome to McDonald's. How may I take your order? Just a Big Mac and a small Coke. Please, all right, sir. And would you like fries with that? No, thank you. Are you sure, sir? It's almost 3 a.m. Okay, so what? All right, sir, that'll be $8.19 after taxes. And how will you be paying a card? Man, John taps his card on the machine and awaits his food, as the odd behavior from the cashier left him feeling uneasy. Nonetheless, John grabs his tray of food and sits down to begin his long chore of study about 10 minutes before 3 a.m. The female bookworm slides by John's table with a frantic look on her face and says, "It's almost time. You should probably pick up your fries. Now, what the hell are you talking about?" "Lady dude, hurry up. We don't have much time." The female proceeds to head towards the front counter while John sat there, dumbfounded. John then gets up from his seat and follows the girl's lead by ordering a large fry after her as the pair head to their respective tables. With their fries, John approaches the female and begins to interrogate her by saying, "I got the fries now. What I recommend, just sitting down with your fries. It's literally going to be 3 a.m. any second now." "What the hell are you talking about?" "Lainey, you don't know about him. The clown who, Ronald McDonald. Haven't you gotten the hint why they always ask if you want fries with that?" No, why? I recommend you always have fries on hand, or else he'll turn you into a McFlurry. And what do we have on today's menu?" "Hello, young lads. Such a fine couple. You all care to share some delectable fries? Pretty please." Okay, sure, sir." Good. Good, I'll catch you all next time and make sure to have fries with your Big Macs and Happy Meals." And that's when he departed the building. The more John studied at the McDonald's, the more he slowly realized that this was an everyday thing. Well, a 3 a.m. thing, to be exact. The so-called Ronald McDonald would torment the customers and employees for fries, as if they were in debt to him for something nobody really bothered to do a damn thing about it, and just went along with the whole facade. John, on the other hand, wasn't so pleased with the idea of being taxed a set of McDonald's in exchange for his fries, but there was nothing he could really do about it. John had spread the word about the clown, but no one really believed him, especially his loud roommate Brad. One night, John decided to bring Brad to the McDonald's and prove that what he was saying was in fact legit. Brad didn't believe him and scoffed at the whole ordeal, as if the clown was some fake phony urban legend or some weirdo hustling food from regular customers. The time was 10 minutes shy before 3, and that's when everyone excluding Brad went to the front counter to pick up an order of fries. What makes the story more disturbing was how Brad carried himself. He had the same stubborn attitude and remained seated at the table, despite John's multiple warnings. When 3 a.m. came around, the clown entered the McDonald's and immediately approached the bookworm's table. First smells like this batch was fresh off the fryer. The clown then approaches John and Brad's table as they looked at the clown with their jaws hanging to the ground. "Look what we have here." That's when John saw Brad holding a handful of fries with his bare hands, and John's fried container completely empty, without an ounce of potato in it. "I recommend you always have fries on hand, or else he'll turn you into a McFlurry." No. I have been in television for 24 years. I just came to get something to eat. and I have very seldom been at a loss for words, sir. I just can't, but I don't even know what to ask you. First, when I was a kid, I didn't have much money. My mom raised me by herself while she worked 2 jobs, so I spent a lot of time alone in our apartment. I had to fend for myself as far as making food and finding things to do for food. I frequented the closest and cheapest thing there was, the McDonald's around the corner. It was easy, and I only needed a handful of quarters to get a meal, which was all I had. As for my entertainment, one thing I did have was my mom's old desktop computer with a CRT monitor. It was already old by those day standards, and this was before we had smartphones. Despite that, to me, access to the internet was an absolute luxury. The big thing on the internet back then was chat rooms. Stuff like Facebook and Instagram didn't exist yet, so just about the only way to talk to people besides email was a chat room. There wasn't much to it. Just some basic information like their name and age, and most of the time the chat rooms are community-based, so you'd be talking to people that live somewhere in your city. I thought it was a pretty neat way to potentially meet people in the real world. Though it did end up having some problems, there was one guy I remember meeting very clearly. He was really cool to talk to online. His name in the chat room was John, and he was around my age. We traded messages almost every day for a few weeks, and we even played the original Counter-Strike together. Then one day, he said he wanted to meet up and get something to eat. I had nothing better to do as usual, so I agreed, but I had to ask if he lived close by. I didn't have a car or bike, and I couldn't really afford to take the bus. I was a slight bit cautious, so I didn't tell him my home address. I just asked if he could meet me at the McDonald's by the big intersection near my place. He said that was no problem, so we agreed to meet there at 6 o'clock that evening. I have to admit I was pretty excited. I never met any of the people I talked to on the internet before, and to be honest, I didn't really have many friends even at school. I had high hopes to hang out with this guy more regularly. Even before I'd seen him for the first time, I raided my mom's coin jar for some quarters, just enough to get a happy meal as usual. Then I walked out into the street around 5 minutes before we were set to meet. I got to the McDonald's at 6 but didn't see him. I kept an eye out for the green jacket John said he'd be wearing as they took a seat in the dining room. The McDonald's employees recognized me as I was there almost every day. I decided to wait for John to get there before I ordered. Knowing I wouldn't be bothered by the workers, after a few minutes I started to get a little anxious. I didn't have a cell phone as they weren't very common back then. I was just sitting there in silence looking around the dining room. That's when I saw a strange-looking man wearing a trench coat standing by the window, staring at me. The moment I made eye contact with him, he began shuffling towards me until he was standing right next to my table. The table was about waist height on him, and he held a Happy Meal box right over the edge. "You look hungry, little boy. Would you like something from my Happy Meal?" No, I'm good. Thanks, I'm just waiting for someone." "Oh, are you waiting for John?" "He's my son," without asking. The man sat down right next to me in the booth when there was a perfectly good seat right across from me. He shifted the Happy Meal box and set it in his lap. Even though the table was right there, he leaned in and mumbled in my ear, like he was about to say some kind of secret. He called me and said he was about to ride his bike to meet somebody here. I know this isn't the greatest part of town, so I thought I should drive over to make sure everything was safe, but I figured he'd be here by now. "Oh, I hope he's okay, but while we're waiting, you should eat something. I bought this Happy Meal for the two of you." "Come on, don't be shy." I really didn't know how to feel about the guy. I was pretty young at the time, now that I think about it. I guess I didn't really have a proper sense of people's intentions. On the one hand, he was really invading my personal space, but on the other hand, his story made sense to me. I mean, how else would he have known the name of the person I was waiting to meet? What made me give him the benefit of the doubt, though, was the growling in my stomach. I knew I could have paid for my own meal, but I didn't think there was anything wrong with getting a little free food. Okay, sure. Thank you, sir. Yeah, that's it. Just reach in there and grab something at random. Be fair to John. He opened up the box as it was still in his lap, but wouldn't let me look inside, desperate for some food. I reached in, but as far as I could tell, there wasn't any food at all in there. I grabbed onto the only thing that was in there, but it definitely wasn't anything that was supposed to be in a Happy Meal. It felt weird, almost clammy, and it wouldn't come out of the box when I tried to retrieve it. Is everything okay over here? Neither of us heard her walking up to us. We both jumped a little bit. I took my hand out of the box, and the man very frantically closed it up. The employee stood sternly with her hands on her hips. Yeah, we're all good here. I'm just enjoying some quality time with my son. I barely had any idea what was going on, but I didn't want to cause any problems with the McDonald's. I ate at almost every day, or the man who said he was my friend's dad. You see out there, my other son is on the other side of that window. You see him there? You lying waste of space, get out of here. I'm calling the cops, right? Then the man threw the Happy Meal box to the side and ran out the door. The woman who must have recognized me. I'm assuming the manager didn't let me leave. She asked for my mom's phone number and called her. It felt like I was in trouble for something, but I didn't know what it was. The woman told me to wait until my mother came to pick me up. So I waited, and in that time, John never showed up, and I eventually realized that he never existed in the first place. But the weirdest part of all is when I picked up the box the man had left behind, irrationally hoping for some food. I realized that it was more than just completely empty. There was a hole cut out of the bottom about 2 inches wide. I had no idea why anyone would do that at the time, but I eventually connected the dots. My mom came a couple hours later and took me home. We didn't talk much about what had happened, but a few months later I figured it out. We were watching the show where they would catch predators, and on that night, the face of the man they caught was one. I recognized. It was the man in the trench coat, and where else had they caught him? But another neighborhood McDonald's. I have been in television for 24 years. I just came to get something to eat, and I have very seldom been at a loss for words, sir. I just came back. I don't even know what to ask you first. I just came to get something to eat. John, we've been through this before. What are you doing? I've got the chat log again. Wow. This is a story that was told to me by my aunt that gave me the chills back in the 90s when she was in college. She worked at Burger King for one summer. She told me that one night when she was at work, it was a really quiet night, and it was pretty late, so it was just her and a few other employees working at the time. My aunt needed to go back to a storage closet. They had to get something. But when she opened the door, she saw a man sitting inside the closet. She screamed and ran away to get another worker when they both came back to the closet and opened it. The man was gone. They had no idea how he could have gotten out without being seen. Then a few weeks later, while working another late-night shift, my aunt was by herself working the cash register. The restaurant was completely empty except for a man sitting by himself in the corner. After a few minutes and getting several looks at him, my aunt recognized him to be the same man that was hiding in the closet from before she wasn't sure what to do. The man was just sitting there in the corner by himself. He didn't order anything, and he wasn't really doing anything either. He was just sitting there. She couldn't help but feel a little bit nervous. My aunt ended up going back to tell one of her co-workers who she was friends with, but when they both came back once again, the man was gone. It was a weird experience, and my aunt only worked at the Burger King for that one summer, not long after she quit working there, but she learned about the history of that Burger King from her friend later on. It used to be a different restaurant, but that restaurant was closed after a man had died inside the restaurant in a robbery when she saw the man's photo. He looked exactly like the one she had seen. The restaurant was abandoned for about a year before Burger King took it over, 5 years before my aunt worked there. It's a pretty creepy story. I work at McDonald's as I'm a high school student and just turned 16, so it's a decent first job for me. About a month ago, I was working in the drive-thru, taking people's orders. It was a Friday night, and things were finally quieting down at about 10 p.m. A car pulled up to the drive-thru, and I began to take their order. After I spoke and asked them what they would like,
They didn't respond. It was just silence for a few seconds. I repeated myself. The person responded by saying my name, and not just my first name, but my full name, first, middle, and last. I realized it must be someone that I knew, but I didn't recognize the voice or the person. I was confused. I asked who it was. They didn't answer. They just repeated my name one more time. They then drove off. It was a man wearing sunglasses. I didn't recognize him at all. I was pretty spooked for the rest of my shift. After I got off, I went home and told my parents. They were just as confused as I was to this day. I don't know who it was, and every time I think about it, it creeps me out. This happened almost 3 years ago now. I was driving back with my friend from college. It was kind of late at night, and we were both super hungry. We saw Exit and took it. When we did, we saw that the only open restaurant there was Arby's. Their drive-thru was out of order, so we both walked inside. The place was very quiet, and we appeared to be the only customers. We ordered, and then stood by waiting for our food. As we were waiting, we saw the door open and a man walk in. He looked to be middle-aged and was rather tall and large. He had glasses and sort of long hair as well. He walked in slowly and looked at us as he did. Then he walked over and sat down at one of the tables in the restaurant. As we waited, I could feel the eyes of the man locking onto US, my friend.
And I would both glance over occasionally to see him staring. It was rather uncomfortable. Finally, our food was done, and they gave it to us. We took it and walked out of the restaurant. As we walked out and went back to my car, I noticed the man was parked directly next to us. At least, I assumed that it was the man's car, because there were only 2 other cars in the entire parking lot. Then I noticed the man exiting the restaurant and walking towards us. He was giving off a really creepy feeling to my friend and I. So we quickly got in my car. We had planned to eat in the parking lot and then drive back. But with the man parked next to us, he got in his car and then began to stare at us once again through the windows of our cars. It was really creepy, so I decided to just drive away. But just as I was afraid of, as soon as I started up my engine, the man started up his as well. And when I started driving away, he followed. I merged back onto the freeway that we had been on before it was pretty late, so not too many cars were out there. Besides us, as we started to speed up through the freeway, the guy in the car behind us went from following us to aggressively tailing us. He drove right up to the bumper of my car and followed extremely close. He was so close that I thought he was going to hit the back of my car. I sped up, but at the same time I knew the potential danger we were in. My heart started to race, and I began sweating the guy behind us, then changed lanes and started driving beside us. I slowed down to let him pass. When I did, he slowed down to the same speed, but as his car got next to mine, I looked over and saw him staring at me with a deranged smile on his face. Then he turned his car right towards ours. I had to swerve onto the shoulder of the freeway and slam on my brakes to avoid him hitting me. He ended up swerving too far and then spinning his car out. As it did, he went off the road and his car went down into the ditch. We slowly drove by as we saw him try to drive out of the ditch, but appeared to get stuck. I was relieved and I didn't want to stay there, so I elected to drive away. But as I did, my friend called the police. We explained the situation, and they said they would have people in the area shortly. I was able to make it home safely, thankfully, but it was a close call and something I will never forget. This happened to me about a year ago. I was hanging out with some of my friends from high school. One of them worked at McDonald's, and we stopped by because he wanted to say hi to one of his co-workers. There were 4 of us, and it was about 10 or 11 at night. Our friend went inside, and the 3 of us chilled outside because it was a nice night. I don't think there were any customers at the time besides us, but after a minute or so, we noticed a man riding a 3-wheel bike around the corner. He had a speaker attached to the back of his bike, which was playing music. We all watched as he rode by us and around the parking lot. He started riding laps around the restaurant. My friends and I thought this was funny and made a couple jokes about it. After about 10 laps, he rode up to us and stopped. He had long hair and a slight beard. He was wearing baggy clothes and appeared to be in his late 20s. He stopped his bike about 5 feet away from us and turned down his music. We all looked at him. "You guys want to know something?" He said, "Sure." I said. He responded with, "I'm about to rob this place." We all looked at each other, confused. One of my friends laughed a little. We figured he was joking, but it was kind of a weird thing to say. He just stared at us with a slight grin on his face for a couple of seconds. I turned and looked and saw my friend was still talking to his coworker, friend at the counter. I kind of wanted to leave. Finally, the man spoke again. "I'd get out of here if I was you guys." He said, "Why is that?" My friend asked. The man said, "To just leave." My friend said, "No, I was surprised, but I realized there were 4 of us and 1 of him, and he wasn't any bigger than any of us." The man stood there next to his bike for about 30 seconds, just staring at us. Finally, he got back on his bike and rode off. We felt tough for possibly preventing a robbery, as much as we didn't know how serious the man was or if he was on drugs or something. We all went home, and the next morning I woke up to see my friend post in our group chat a link to a news story. It was about a local bank that had been broken into the previous night. A rock was thrown through the window and a man was arrested inside. It was the same man I used to work pretty late nights at one of the jobs I had a few years ago. I remember one night. After work, I was especially hungry and wanted to get some food on the way home. It was after midnight, though, so I knew I didn't have many options. Of course, as I was driving down the road, I saw a Taco Bell sign, and I knew they were usually open late, so I decided to stop there. I was not all that familiar with the area because I only lived in that city for the job I had had, and I was from another state entirely. As I pulled into the Taco Bell parking lot, I could see that it seemed a little outdated and run down. There was also nobody else there, but that wasn't all too strange with it being so late. The area did look pretty run down, and it was a little sketchy, but I didn't care. I was just really hungry. I pulled into the drive-thru. It took a while for the person to ask me what I wanted, but when they finally did, I ordered 2 beef burritos. I pulled around to the next window and paid the worker, said the food would be out shortly, and then walked away from the window. Once they walked away, it took a really long time for them to come back. I sat there waiting for about 5 minutes. I wondered why it would be taking so long because nobody else was here. And I had ordered one of the most common things on the menu. Still, I wasn't going to complain as long as I got my food. But then out of nowhere, I felt the back passenger side door to my car tried to be open. I was driving an SUV, but thankfully, my back doors were locked. I looked but couldn't see anybody. They must have quickly hid behind my car at an angle. I couldn't see. Then I heard someone kick the back of my car. As they kicked it, I looked again and saw somebody duck down behind the back of my car. Then I started to see a man running out of a bush on the edge of the parking lot of the Taco Bell. He was running straight from my car and appeared to be wearing a ski mask covering his whole head. I didn't waste a moment and quickly hit the gas pedal and sped away. I could see him and another man running after me in my rear view mirror as I sped off. I left the area quickly and ended up driving home without getting any food. I reported the incident, but I never stopped at that Taco Bell again. This happened to me last year. I was hungry after a late night shift at work. It was past midnight, so I knew I didn't have many options. I saw McDonald's and pulled off the highway to go there. McDonald's hours vary depending on the location, so I was hoping they would be open. However, the lights were fairly dim, so I wasn't quite sure. I decided to pull into the drive-thru to see. When I pulled up to the speaker, I heard a voice say, "Hi, welcome to McDonald's. What can I get you today?" I said I would have the number 9, and that was all. They said sure, and to pull up to the first window, so I pulled my car around. However, when I reached the window, nobody came to it. I saw the kitchen lights appeared to be all dimmed, as if they were closed. I waited there for a couple minutes. I knew I was the only customer, so I didn't know what was taking them so long. After another minute went by, I didn't see any movement at all. I took out my phone and searched McDonald's on Google Maps. The location came up, and when I looked, it said it was closed. I was confused and kept staring at my screen, wondering if this was a mistake. Just then, I saw somebody finally appear at the window, out of the corner of my eye. It was a man in all black, with the hood covering most of his face. As soon as I turned my head, he ducked down, I drove off as fast as I could and went straight home. I don't know who that was or what happened, but I do know I won't go back to that McDonald's when I was in college. I worked at McDonald's during the summer. One day, I was working on a Saturday, and I was behind the counter taking people's orders. It was going pretty well for a weekend until a man came up and asked for 2 Big Macs. I put in the order he paid, and I gave him his receipt. I then helped the next person in line. About a minute later, he came back up and said he was charged for 2 Big Macs, but he only wanted one. I told him he ordered 2, because I know I heard him say 2 Big Macs. He got angry when I said that and said, "Don't put words in my mouth, I know what I said." "I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't trying to," I said. He then told me not to get smart with him. I could tell he was a short-tempered man. I apologized again and offered to give him money back for a Big Mac and only give him the one, but he said he didn't want that anymore. He then started saying that I should be fired. I told him to calm down, but that didn't work. He started raising his voice, and everybody in the restaurant was beginning to notice. One of my co-workers, Jack, came up and started talking to the man. After a brief conversation with Jack, he said he didn't want anything and he just wanted to leave. We gave him his money, and I thought the situation was over. That is until he leaned in over the counter and said to me, "When you get off, I'll be waiting for you." I didn't know whether to take this as a joke or not, but clearly the man had issues if he was going to make a scene over an extra Big Mac. I didn't say anything and he turned and walked out. I wasn't too concerned with this threat at all because I was only an hour into my 8-hour shift. I knew there's no way a man was going to wait around that long, and I didn't think he would actually do that at all. I worked the rest of my shift, which went by relatively well. In fact, by the time I was done, I had forgotten all about the incident. It was 10 p.m. when I was off, so I got my things and headed out to my car. As I approached my car, I saw a car at the other end of the parking lot's doors swing open. Sure enough, out walked a man from earlier. I couldn't believe he actually waited for me. I sprinted for my car and he chased after me. I almost made it to my door. When he grabbed my arm, he started to pull me away from my car, and that's when I screamed. Like a little girl, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my pepper spray and sprayed it everywhere. Eventually got his face in the struggle, and he let go of me and ran away. I accidentally sprayed myself in the face as well, but I was able to get into my car and locked the door with my eyes burning. It didn't get me too bad, and I was able to regain my composure. After a couple minutes, I saw 2 people walking towards my car in concern. They asked me if I was okay, and if they should call the police. I said yes, and the police arrived shortly after and took down my information. Unfortunately, the man got away, but I just feel lucky that he didn't hurt me. It still blows my mind to think that he waited around 7 hours to confront me. Ever since I first went to Chick-fil-A, it's been one of my favorite restaurants I've always loved. Their chicken sandwiches and their sauce always hits the spot. However, the college that I recently graduated from is in an area where there's no Chick-fil-A nearby, so when I was at school, I could never have it last year. When the semester finally came to an end, I was driving back home to get to my parents' house, and I had the idea to get Chick-fil-A. I left my school in the morning, and it was a 4-hour drive to get back home. When I got about an hour away from home, my cravings got the better of me, and I saw a Chick-fil-A and stopped. It was a Chick-fil-A that I had never been to before, but it looked relatively new and was very busy. I got in the drive-through line, which was long but moving fast. I ordered the number 1, which is what I usually got, of a chicken sandwich, fries, and a drink. I was so hungry that I decided to park and eat it. There, the Chick-fil-A was in a large shopping area that had a mall with a really big parking lot connected to it. So I drove to an open area of the mall parking lot that wasn't very busy. I started to eat, but before long I was kind of annoyed with the way that the sun was shining right into my front window. Onto me, I moved parking spaces down to where there was a shady spot near a tree as I backed up my car out of the spot and started to drive. I saw that there was another car that was parked a little ways away from me that started to leave at the same time. I drove over and parked next to a tree, and the car followed me and parked about 10 spots away from me. I found it odd, but overall was more focused on eating a while later when I decided to continue with my drive. Home, I had forgotten all about the car and started to drive away. But when I did, I noticed the car start to drive with me. I never bothered to look to see who was driving it, and it was too far away to tell. By this point, I once again found it odd. But what could I do? I got back on the road and then merged onto the freeway that was close by. I noticed the entire time that the car that was seemingly following me did the same. I got kind of worried when I saw this. I wondered why someone would follow me. Had I accidentally cut him off or something? Before I kept on driving down the road, and the car remained behind me the entire time. I tried some things like slowing down or changing lanes, but he kept following me. I still couldn't really tell much about how the driver looked because I still wasn't able to get a very good look at him. The closer I got to home, the more concerned I became because I didn't want to go all the way home and have this guy potentially know where I live. When I got about 10 minutes away from home, I decided to pull off the highway again and take the exit. I didn't really have much of a plan, but I knew I shouldn't go to my house with somebody following me. There was a little town that had a few stores and gas stations. I pulled into the parking lot of a supermarket and parked in a spot in the back where there weren't many other cars. Of course, the car that was following me did as well. I got out my phone and called my parents. I was going to tell them that I had been followed and ask them what to do. But before I could finish telling them, I saw that the car had parked in a spot behind me in a few spaces to the left. I noticed that the driver's door of the car opened, and both passengers' doors in the back did as well. I saw 3 large men all get out of the car and start heading towards me. In this moment, as they approached my car, I panicked and slammed my foot on the gas pedal and sped away. I saw the men then stop and begin to run back to their car. This is where I got lucky. In a way, there happened to be a police car that was driving on the quiet road, connecting the supermarket with other businesses. When he saw me speeding away in an almost reckless way, he pulled me over the car that was following me, slowed down too, but then drove away. When the officer got to my window, he told me I was driving a little wild, and I told him my situation. He then gave me just a warning to slow down and drive safer, and offered to drive behind me for a few miles to make sure that I wasn't followed. I took him up on the offer, and luckily, I was able to make it home safely without ever seeing that car again. This story happened about a year ago. I was at Chick-fil-A with my girlfriend one night. It was one of both of our favorite restaurants, and we would get it all the time. Usually we would go through the drive-thru, but tonight we decided to eat inside the restaurant. It was a little bit later at night, and not very many other people were there at all. We sat in a booth on the far side of the restaurant, and were all by ourselves for the most part. We were eating, joking around, and just having normal conversation, when all of a sudden I heard a banging at the window, right in front of me. We were sitting by the window, so I was super startled, because it was dark out, and the way the window was, I couldn't really see out of it very well at first, but when I looked, I saw a man. There was a guy who looked pretty mean. He was angrily banging on the glass right in front of us. My girlfriend and I were both pretty startled, and we watched the man to see what his problem was. He started to yell something at us, but I couldn't understand what he was yelling. The man wore a dark sweatshirt with the hood up and appeared to wear glasses and have a brown goatee. I don't know if he was insane or what, because I certainly hadn't done anything to make him angry. The man then suddenly stopped yelling and turned his back on us, then sprinted away into the night. My girlfriend and I both looked at each other in shock. "What was that?" she asked. I figured the guy was insane or on drugs or something like that, but we were both just glad that he was gone. Like many Chick-fil-A, it was next to multiple businesses, so we figured he had come from one of those. We both talked about it for a few minutes, and then we're ready to go back home. I had to use the bathroom, so I told my girlfriend that I would be right back, and then we would leave. I walked inside the bathroom into the urinal and did my business as I was in there, though I remember seeing someone was using one of the stalls in the men's room. When I was done, I got to the sink and began washing my hands when I heard the stall door start to open. I casually looked over to see who was coming out. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the same man who had been outside. He stopped in his place and just stared at me. Then slowly, a really wide and creepy grin came over his face. I didn't waste any time and quickly left the bathroom as fast as I could. I saw my girlfriend was waiting for me by the door, and she could see the panic on my face. She asked me what was wrong, and I just told her we had to go. I didn't pay any attention to if the man followed us or not. When we got to the car, I told my girlfriend about how I had seen the man in the bathroom. She was really shocked to hear this, and we drove home after that. Thankfully, we never saw the man again. What was the most crazy thing is that we had a view of the only entrance to the restaurant the entire time, and we never saw the man come inside the door. I don't know how he was suddenly inside the bathroom, but thinking about it gives me the creeps. My life will never be the same because of one night I was driving home from a friend's house located on the outskirts of the city. As far as my eyes went, I could only see vast cornfields on both sides of the road. My house was still 40 minutes away, and I could hear the angry rumble of my stomach, but I couldn't see any sign of a house or people until I took a left turn for a shortcut. The scenery was different after this turn. Now the cornfields were substituted by deep woods. Hooting owls and howling coyotes reminded me that I'm too far from home in the middle of the night. I didn't want to stop no matter how hungry I felt, so I kept on driving for a few kilometers straight. But then I saw this McDonald's drive-through and I knew I had to stop. I drove straight into the queue passages, which had no other cars, and stopped right next to the window. A skinny teenage boy was dozing off sitting on the counter. I honked my horn twice and he woke up with an awkward face. I'm sorry, sir. I was just relaxed, man. No problem. I get it. It's okay to be tired. He smiled and asked for my order. I'll have a Big Mac with 1 small fries and an iced tea. Okay? Give me some time to get back with your food saying this. He went inside the restaurant to prepare the meal. I figured out this outlet is short-staffed, so the boy's in charge of everything tonight. I sat quietly waiting for my meal, but then the urge to pee hit me right away. I came out of the car and went to use the public toilet located in the corner of the drive-thru. I was about to close the door when I noticed a guy dressed as Ronald McDonald. Sitting on a bench at some distance, he had a sad face and was staring at the ground like he was about to cry. Suddenly, he looked up and our eyes met. A weird smile appeared on his face. His teeth were broken in places, making his smile way more horrible. His eyes were big, yet drowsy. He had a hypnotic stare that made me very uncomfortable. His face was so bony that I could see his cheekbones gushing out of his skin. I couldn't move, and he just watched me for a few seconds, and then he stood up retaining that same creepy smile and started to jog, standing in the same place. What a creep. Saying this, I closed the toilet door on his face. I was doing my business when I heard a muffled sobbing sound. The sound wasn't very loud, but it was shortly spooky enough. Is that guy crying? What the hell is wrong with that dude? Suddenly the sound stopped and silence prevailed. I turned towards the door, pondering what I would see when I opened it, and a loud bang took place, almost giving me a heart attack, followed by a familiar voice. Sir, are you in there? I opened the door and saw it was that skinny teenager standing outside with a big packet in his hand. Your food is ready. I cut out to you. But yeah, I had to take a leak. He handed me the food and we both walked my car. I was taking out the cash for my wallet to pay him.
when I noticed the bench where that Ronald guy was sitting a few minutes back. It was empty, and the guy was nowhere to be found. Seeing me checking out the bench, the boy asked, "Is anything wrong, sir?" "Nothing like that. It's just your Ronald McDonald guy is pretty creepy. He would scare the kids away." "What Ronald McDonald guy? The man who is sitting here a few moments back wearing your mascot costume?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, sir. We don't have anyone like that here. I'm all this place is God." A cold shiver ran down my spine as he said that. I paid him quickly and without much ado got back on the road. The confused boy watched me drive away in a hurry. I rolled the windows down to get some fresh air. Some crazy man creeped me out and looked at me, and I was being all childish about it. I felt humiliated by my cowardly behavior. The boy must be laughing on his own, now seeing a guy double his age get scared of some stupid mascot. I want to turn on some music to take my mind off of everything. But before I could press the button on my music player, a squeaky laugh came from the back seat. I could feel my heartbeat getting faster. Drops of sweat appeared on my forehead as I slowly looked at the rearview mirror. A dark, shadowy figure was sitting in my back seat. It was a man with a curly red wig on his head. He slowly surfaced from the darkness, and the passing streetlights illuminated his face. That same wide but drowsy eyes, a red-painted big smile that was watching me. I was so freaked out that I forgot to scream. A cold, sharp, metallic thing touched my neck as the creepy Ronald leaned close to me. "You shouldn't have closed the door on me, mate." What do you want? I want to show you how sharp this knife is. Hand me your iced tea. Come on, do it, do it. Okay. I handed him my cup of iced tea. The situation was tense. I couldn't speed up, fearing that he would definitely slit my throat and none of my loved ones would ever discover my body. So I decided to handle the entire situation very carefully.
I didn't want to do anything reckless to make this psycho snap. He placed the cup right on my shoulder and then moved the knife swiftly. The knife was so sharp that it cut the bottom of the cup like butter, and the cold tea spilled all over my clothes. Oh my God. He laughed his heart out while I almost shat my pants. I said in a fumbled voice, "Look, mister. Call me Ronald." Yes, Ronald. I'm sorry for disrespecting you earlier. Please forgive me. That's a good start, so just tell me where to drop you and I will. No issues. Are you trying to get rid of me? No. Drive quietly. I'll tell you where to stop. Okay? Okay, whatever you say. Good boy. I kept driving, and Ronald watched me while smiling like a lunatic the entire time. When he came near a right turn and Ronald screamed, "That's it. Stop right there, and then we will both get out of the car. It will be a night full of so much fun." I slowed the car down near the turn. I knew deep in my heart that if I got down there with this psycho, I'm probably never going back home. I have to do something to save myself. I kept trying to think of a way to fool him and get away with my life when he yelled again. "Are you going to stop or should I make you?" No, I'll stop." I slowed the car down but didn't turn off the engine. He opened the back door, and as soon as he stepped outside, I put the car in gear to speed away. But instead of the first gear, I put the car in reverse out of panic as I pressed the accelerator hard. The car moved backwards at a sudden speed and bumped into the man standing there, not expecting this sudden turn of events. He fell to the ground, and I couldn't stop myself from hitting him once more. The left tire ran over his leg, breaking all the bones in his limb. I could hear the cracking and his dying scream all together. "Eat, you freak!" I screamed at him and drove away without wasting a single more second. The guy was so evil that even after losing his entire leg, he still got up, and in a very freaky way tried to chase my car supporting his body on his one good leg. His smile grew even bigger as he chased me. Before my car went away from his sight, I heard his loud voice echoing in the night screaming, "I'm Ronald McDonald. No one gets away from me." I can't explain how I got home that night, but after that day, I stopped going to McDonald's forever. Working in customer service is not easy since I've been working at McDonald's. I've encountered all kinds of customers. Many of them take a long time to order and delay the line. Others get angry for the craziest reasons. From the first day, we are taught to deal with all kinds of people, but nothing could prepare me for what I experienced that day. It was a Tuesday afternoon and my shift had just started. I had to work in the drive-thru, which is usually much quieter, so the day had not started badly. Customers were coming in very slowly, and I was a bit bored until I heard a request that caught my attention. "Good afternoon, sir. May I take your order?" "Yes, I want 3 hamburgers." "Very well, sir. What kind of hamburgers? I don't care. I just want a hamburger." This person seemed a little angry about my question. He seemed desperate for those hamburgers. "Okay, sir. How about 3 Big Macs?" "Yes, that's perfect. Do you want them in a combo?" "No. I told you I just want the burgers. I need them." Some of my coworkers were laughing hard at this guy, but I couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable as his car moved forward. I did my best not to grimace. The man was short and slightly overweight, but his appearance was disgusting. His whole face was covered in sauce. His hair was so long and greasy that he chewed his bangs with his teeth. I could see how his clothes were shredded and parts of his body were showing through. The disgusting man opened the window and a horrendous smell almost made me vomit. I thought he might be offended by this, but he didn't pay me the slightest attention and spoke to me. "Take the money and do you have my food?" With some distaste, I took his money, sir. "This is much more than I want my food. I'm sorry, sir." Take it, handing him the burgers, he almost didn't take the paper off them as he began to devour them savagely on the spot. A part of me wanted to turn away, but I couldn't help but watch, mesmerized as he smashed the burgers into his mouth and proceeded to chomp down on them at an impressive speed. "Sir, can you eat somewhere else? Please, another car may come." He ignored me and just kept eating, sir. I'm talking to you. Would you please move your car forward and leave?" When I found no answer, I quickly went to my manager, who told me that since there was no security that day, I should go with 2 more colleagues to knock on his window. I was a little hesitant, but my boss was somewhat authoritarian, so I knew I had no choice. I told 2 of my colleagues and we went out to the front door, so we're gonna have the privilege. Of meeting the hamburger maniac. What do you mean, have you met him before? Everyone on the night shift knows him? The lunatic just comes in, eats his burgers in the car and leaves. Looks like he got hungry a little early today. Well, is he dangerous? He gave me a really bad vibe. Nah, he's harmless. When I got to his car, I didn't even get to knock on his window. The man was gone when I said he was leaving after lunch. He usually takes the car with him. Seems like today he was in a hurry. We started to check his windows, but there was no sign of him confused. We went back to our manager, who said he would handle things from now on. I figured he would send a tow truck if the owner didn't show up. But to tell you the truth, I wasn't interested. I was just glad not to deal with that lunatic anymore. I was on my way back to my post, but on the way I heard something that caught my attention. Some very strange noises were coming from the storage room. I recognized that noise as that of an animal eating, so I went through the door with some curiosity. What I saw would leave me shocked. The man in the car was behind the door. He was sprawled on the floor with his shirt off, eating medallions of raw hamburgers. When I saw him, I felt like I was gonna throw up a maniac. Grabbed 4 hamburgers at a time and stuffed them all together in his mouth. The raw minced meat joined in his hand, forming a mass of food that he swallowed desperately, no matter how much of it landed on his hairy body. I couldn't stand the urge any longer and threw up on the floor, falling to my knees when I was finally able to recover. I raised my head again, and the lunatic was in front of me, staring at me and concentrating on my presence for the first time. "You're coming to eat too?" I couldn't answer him as I was still shaken after the vomiting. I tried to get up, but it was useless. The man pushed me to the floor and sat on my belly. Let the man get off of me without answering me. He started smiling with a devilish look on his face, and just as he did, he revealed that he had more medallions of raw hamburger in his hand. "What are you doing with that? Get away from me." "Easy. There's enough for both of us." Having said that, he stuck his hand full of raw meat in my mouth. I was choking. I moved my hands desperately, trying to hit him, to get the food out of my mouth. Anything that could free me from that situation. The man lunged at me and proceeded to bite my face like I was one of those hamburgers. I frantically punched him. but he didn't react. He just kept pressing me with his teeth. I felt like I was going to die. That lunatic was going to eat me alive, and I would never even know why. I heard a scream behind me, and as fast as it started, the man stopped biting me and fell to my side. Wounded, I looked up, and one of my co-workers was behind me, breathing heavily with a broken broomstick in his hand. The maniac recovered from being hit by the broomstick and lunged at me again, but my partner had already pulled me out of the storage room and closed the door. "Somebody help us. Luke is hurt, man. Is that the hamburger maniac? Are you all right?" Without answering him, I spit all the raw meat out of my mouth and breathed easier again. Within seconds, all our co-workers were there helping me and looking for a way to cover the wound on my face. While the ambulance was coming, I managed to stand up on my own, and while I was covering my face, I noticed that many of my colleagues were looking at the window of the storage room. "What's going on? What are you doing, dude? You have to see this." I looked out the window, and the man was at the back of the storage room eating a raw hamburger. The difference was that now he had a lot of hamburgers wrapped around his body, and as he was eating them, he was looking at the window suspiciously, as if the employees were trying to steal them. Shortly thereafter, the police took the man who was behaving more like a wild animal than a human shortly after leaving the hospital. I went back to work, but I wasn't there for long. Every time I saw a hamburger medallion, I wanted to vomit in the short time I was there. I heard all kinds of rumors. The calmer ones said he was a lonely man who was extremely stoned, but other rumors said he was a cannibal who escaped from a Satanist ritual with a hunger for human flesh. I was never interested in hearing any explanation of who this man was. It was enough that every time I saw myself in the mirror, I would remember the marks he left on me for life. Most of the time, it's the big deliberate decisions that change your life, but sometimes the smallest situations, those that you considered insignificant, end up having an impact you could have never imagined. When I was a teenager, I lived with my parents since they both worked. I usually stayed home alone until late, so they gave me money either to buy food and prepare it, or go out to eat somewhere one afternoon. I decided to go eat at McDonald's, the closest fast food place to my home. As always, I walked to the restaurant on this occasion. I was alone, but sometimes my friends accompanied me. The truth was that I didn't mind being without them. Since I had gotten used to being alone once I got into that McDonald's, I realized that for some reason it was quite crowded. So the line to order was very long. Still, I decided to stay there and wait, since I wasn't really that hungry. "I want a Big McCombo, please." I heard people order their food while waiting. I'm a double with hash browns. But at some point I got bored, so I took out my earbuds, connected them to my cell phone, and started listening to music on Spotify. Still, I was alert after a few songs. It was finally the turn of the girl in front of me, as she started to order her food. I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I saw a huge person stop right next to me on the left side of the line, but I didn't really care. "Hey, you boy." Since I wasn't paying attention and was listening to music, I didn't hear the man "I'm talking to you, kid." This time he spoke louder, so I took off my left earbud and turned my head to see him. The person was a tall man, overweight, but with arms that seemed strong. His beard was long and unkempt, as was his appearance. The man looked at me for a moment and then demanded, "Move. What I told you to move." It's my turn, sir. I don't care, boy. Don't you understand? Move or I'll move you." I stood there still for a few seconds. A bad feeling began to grow inside me as I realized the man's fists had tightened. Was he trying to threaten me? Why me? Just because I was a teenager? No, wait your turn. Like everyone else, I won't let you take mine. I'm hungry. Suddenly, the man grabbed one of my arms tightly and moved closer to me. "If you don't move, I'm gonna rip your guts out, kid." His breath smelled so horrible that I wanted to pull away immediately, but he wouldn't let me as he held me tighter. I could even feel his nails hurting me. Being close to the man, I could see his rotten teeth, as well as the remains of food in his beard. It was disgusting. Was I clear? His eyes, which had red veins, were wide open. What the heck? At this point, I couldn't help but be scared. It sounded like the man was really going to do what he said just because of me, not letting him cut in line, sir. What are you doing? I turned my head to see who had spoken, the cashier. Finally, my turn. Aren't you ashamed of taking so long? The man let go of me so I could see what he had done to my arm. It was red and had purple marks where his fingernails had been. Excuse me, sir, but I think it was the boy's turn. It wasn't. Was it? I want a Big Mac combo. Of course, I wasn't going to let that man get what he wanted after he hurt me. Okay, and sir, please don't try to cut in line again, kidding me. The man turned and, passing me by, said piece of. I ignored him, paid for the food, and waited for it to be ready. Once the order was handed to me, I went to sit down, already very hungry. I grabbed the Big Mac and started eating, but I couldn't help feeling a sense of discomfort. When I looked in front of me, I realized why that man was staring at me. He didn't seem noticeably upset, but the look on his face, it seemed as if he was going to lose control any second. I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't continue eating like that, so I sat on the chair in front of me, and that way the man could no longer see me directly. I continued eating quietly until suddenly some complaints began to be heard. This is not what I ordered. It was that man's voice. I'm sorry, sir. We're sorry you did it on purpose. You did it because I tried to cut in line, didn't you? You unsettled. I turned around to see what was happening, all because of that piece of the man was pointing at me. Sir, we won't tolerate insults. Oh, so now this is a goddamn church. I should beat the out of you. Get out of here, I didn't want this anyway. The man threw his burger at the woman and then walked out of the McDonald's. Almost immediately, people started whispering about what had happened. I looked at the cashier, who was being helped by one of her co-workers. I am glad he left. He was out of control. Did you hear him? That's when I realized that I was hyperventilating. I was terrified and it hadn't even happened to me, but just thinking about the threats the man had told me. Uneasy, I finished my burger. It was 5:32 p.m. when I left the place, so it was already beginning to get dark. I started to walk in the direction of my house, but soon I began to hear footsteps behind me. You took your time, kid. When I heard the voice, I stood still, frozen like a statue. It was that man. Again, did you enjoy your food? My heart was beating fast. He was totally out of his mind. Had he really waited for me? I didn't, because of you. I started hyperventilating again. My vision became blurry. I was terrified. Are you scared, kid? Suddenly, a strong punch to my back made me fall. The next thing I knew, that man had turned me around and was starting to hit me. I told you, didn't I? I'm gonna rip your guts out over and over. The man punched me in the face. I tried to push him away, but he was too heavy. Soon I began to feel my face swell, the blood coming out. At one point, I even heard a crack and a strong pain in my nose. Luckily, that afternoon, some people who were in the surrounding area managed to help me. Otherwise, I would have died at the hands of that man. Of course, he left my face smashed and swollen. He managed to break my nose, my lips. That was a key point in my life because I realized that there are brutal, uncontrollable people out there. I have had enough of McDonald's in this one childhood incident to be blamed for it. I was in middle school when my mom married a man from her workplace. They dated for a year and suddenly decided to tie the knot. I never knew my dad. My mom single-handedly raised me and my little sister Jenny. I wasn't very happy with the idea of having a stepdad in our family. Even though this guy named David was fun-loving, I always felt weird around him. Even though he beguiled my mom and Jenny with his innocent face, I knew there was something evil lurking inside of that man. Anyways, after a small marriage ceremony, David officially became a member of our family. Though Jenny got mixed up with him easily, I kept my distance. I always watched his every single action, silently looking for one red flag. I was playing in the backyard one day and he came to me. "What's up, Alex? Can I play with you?" I didn't reply and just sat quietly. "Look, Alex, I know you don't see me as your father, but we can be friends. You gotta give me a chance, man." I felt a bit bad for being so hard on him, so I said, "Okay, we can be friends." "Great. How about we go to lunch today? Mom has to go to work." So you, me, and Jenny. It'll be fun. Okay, let's go. I saw a smile on my mom's face once she came to know that I had agreed to go to lunch with David. She might have felt relieved, thinking, finally, we were getting along. David took us to the mall, he bought us toys, and took us to the gaming section. Jenny and I had fun that afternoon when it was time to go for lunch. David took us to McDonald's, we ate burgers with lots of fries, and came home after that day. Whenever we ordered food or went out to eat, David always took us to McDonald's. It started to feel freakishly weird after a certain point in time. Sometimes for breakfast, he would get sausages and muffins from McDonald's for lunch. He would order a bacon, double cheeseburger, and most weekends he ate his favorite meal, a Big Mac and fries. He enjoyed the food. No doubt whenever I saw him munching the burger, I felt kind of creeped out. He used to take big bites while staring at us in a very freaky way. It was as if he was not only eating with his mouth, but also with his hungry eyes. After a point, we three couldn't put up with this obsession with McDonald's. I couldn't bear the sight of a McDonald's burger. Eventually, we started avoiding eating at McDonald's, but David didn't take it in a good way. He started behaving like a completely different person, as if we had betrayed him in some way. One night, my mom wanted to order food from a local Chinese restaurant. David immediately got furious and said, "But why not McDonald's? We all eat from McDonald's." "David, I think we've had enough McDonald's food. The kids want to try something else now." "Yeah, right? Why don't you be honest with me? Honest about what that they are sick and tired of their stepdad and you all don't want to eat with me anymore. You all want to kick me out of this family, right?" He stormed out in his car and didn't return for 2 days. My mom kept calling him, but David didn't respond. One Saturday evening, David came back. He was looking wicked, like he hadn't slept in a really long time. His eyes were puffy and his hair was disheveled. He brought burgers and fries from McDonald's and ate alone, sitting at the kitchen table while giving us that same creepy stare. We all had dinner and went to our rooms to sleep. David slept on the living room couch, and my mom was too tired to pick up another fight with him. She decided to comfort him in the morning about his weird behavior and take final action. Jenny and I slept in the big bedroom right beside the living room. I don't exactly remember what time it was, but I heard our bedroom door cleaned open. The light peered in from the hallway, and I could see a figure standing near our bedroom door. I could tell it was a man, but his face was completely shrouded in darkness. Jenny was scared of the darkness, so we had a small table lamp lit in our room at night. As soon as the man stepped into our room, I recognized him. I blinked my eyes in surprise. It was a Ronald McDonald. He was just standing there silently and staring at us. He didn't seem to be aware that I was awake in the dim light. He crept into our room and tiptoed quietly over to Jenny's bed from where I was laying. I could see him reach out and grab my sister with his strong hands. Then, all of a sudden, he started to shake her violently, saying, "I'm loving it, I'm loving it." My sister started to scream, and I hit the lights immediately as I got close to look at the face. I realized it was David, dressed as Ronald McDonald and scaring my sister. He didn't seem to be bothered at all by the lights or me witnessing him doing this. He just kept screaming, "I'm loving it. Let go of my sister, you freak." My mom came rushing from upstairs, hearing my sister and me screaming. In the middle of the night, from the doorway, I heard my mother's voice cry out in alarm, "What the hell are you doing?" Quickly released my sister and ran towards the big glass window. In our room, shattering those glass pieces, David fell on the hard ground. Even though it was a ground floor window, I saw broken glass piercing his face, creating a bloody mess. He then stood outside the window and stared right at us. Jenny and I hugged Mom tightly and started to sob in fear. She couldn't believe her eyes, needless to say. Seeing David that way gave her a hell of a shock. David gave us an ear-to-ear smile and said, "How can you not love McDonald's? Because I am definitely loving it." He then ran away while laughing like a crazy psycho. My mom filed a restraining order against him. I don't know what he would have done to us, and my mom wasn't home that night. It took months for my sister to come out of the trauma of that night, and we eventually went on with our lives. My mom filed for divorce as well, and after David, she still hasn't dated any other guy. I know somewhere deep down she thinks it all happened because she brought David into the family. I don't know where David is now, and I don't want to know David if you're watching this. I dare you to come near us now because I am quite capable of teaching you one final lesson that I couldn't last time before starting the story. I would suggest you guys to go subscribe to the channel. It turns out that most of you guys who watch me aren't actually subscribed. So if you like the content and want to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell. It's free and you can always change your mind later. You can take this story as a cautionary tale because that one time I took something from someone without asking for permission. It turned my life upside down. I was 8 years old when this happened. I've always been an active kid, hence I got into trouble quite easily. One day I went to play in the city park with my friends. We were playing in the jungle gym. Everyone was trying to hold on as long as they could. I was hanging on it for a long time and out of overconfidence tried to pull off some stunts. My hands eventually slipped and I fell on the hard ground, fracturing my leg. I was admitted to the hospital immediately, and that's where I met Sam. Sam was another kid similar to my age. He was really sick and often went to surgeries every 2 days. His parents used to come and cry sitting in front of his bed. Sam never talked to anyone. His bed was right next to mine. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I woke up hearing his heavy breathing. I could tell his health was deteriorating rapidly one day. Sam fell very sick and he was taken to the ICU while he was away. I noticed a bunch of Happy Meal toys under his pillow. I was just a kid and kind of wanted that collection. The next day, I was about to be discharged from the hospital, so I secretly put his collection in my backpack. With my other stuff, I was deeply asleep when I felt someone standing near my bed. I saw with my sleepy eyes that it was Sam. I woke up frantically saying, "Hey Sam, you scared me. How long have you been standing there?" He didn't reply to me. There was something different with Sam. His face was pale and his eyes were like a dead fish. I said again, "So you've been discharged from the ICU? Huh. I want my toys back now." I was all nervous about this awkward confrontation. I knew he would realize after coming back, but I was hoping he would find out. After I left the hospital, I wanted to keep the toys, and if I returned them now, it would directly prove that I stole them, so I denied it to his face. "What toys are you talking about, Sam?" "My Happy Meal toys from McDonald's. You took them last night. They're in your backpack." Sam spoke as if he saw me doing all of this. His accuracy kind of disturbed me, but I was adamant as well. "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't take your toys." Suddenly, Sam's face started to change. His eyes got wide and furious. He looked at me like a hungry wolf and said, "I want my toys back. I want them back." He then opened his mouth and his jaw started to expand horrifyingly. I screamed in fear and woke up on my bed, drenched in sweat. "Were you having a bad dream, Paul?" I saw a nurse standing near my bed. I looked outside the window and realized that it was morning. Was it all a dream? But it felt so real. I looked at Sam's bed and found it empty. "Are you looking for your friend?" "We weren't friends." "Oh, that's too bad. Your parents will be here soon to take you home." Sister." The nurse was walking away, hearing my voice. She turned back and said, "Yes. Do you need something? How is Sam doing?" "Oh, well, he's in a better place now. May God bless his soul." The nurse left, and I realized that Sam was no more on the way home. I heard my parents talking about Sam and feeling sorry for him and his parents. Sam passed away at around 8 o'clock last night. I felt goosebumps thinking on. I dreamt of a dead boy in the middle of the night. I looked inside my backpack. Sam's Happy Meal toys were still there. I didn't tell anyone about all this. A week passed by and things got back to normal every weekend. My parents took me to the mall. We watched a movie and ate junk food one weekend after spending fun time at the mall. My dad took us to eat at McDonald's. I just took a bite of a cheeseburger when my eyes went to the last table in the corner. What I saw ran a cold shiver down my spine. It was Sam. He was sitting at the corner table wearing the hospital outfit on which I saw him last time. His eyes were blood red and filled with anger. He opened his hollow mouth and said something, but I couldn't hear his voice. Judging by the movement of his lips, I could tell he was repeating one line over and over again. I was becoming numb with fear. "Paul, are you all right, honey?" My mom's worried voice set me free from that frozen hell. I got back to my senses and tried my best to hide my fear. Yeah, I'm fine, Mom." When I looked at the table again, I found it empty. No one was there. I somehow finished my food and we got up to leave for home. My mom and dad were walking in front of me. We were near the exit door when I saw a guy dressed as Ronald McDonald giving balloons to every kid when my turn came. He crouched down and handed me a blue-colored balloon. I smiled and said, "Thank you." He got extremely close to my face and said, "Sam wants his Happy Meal toys back." I screamed and ran to my dad for a moment. Everyone around got shocked. My dad asked me what happened. "Paul, did he scare you?" I looked back at the guy, but he even looked terrified with my reaction. He said in a nervous voice, "I don't know what happened, sir. Your kid got scared on his own and screamed in my face. I started to realize that Sam's ghost was haunting me because I took his toys. But what can I do now he's dead? And someone come back from the dead to haunt a living person? Do ghosts really exist?" I caught a high fever after coming home that night. My parents thought the guy dressed as Ronald McDonald scared me, but only if they knew the truth. I might have passed away with a high fever, hence I don't remember what happened after we reached home. I woke up past midnight hearing a thunder crack. A heavy storm was going on outside. I could see a flash of lightning reflecting on my room walls. I understood I was lying on my bed. My eyes took some time to adjust to the darkness. I checked the corners of my room with scared eyes. I felt Sam's ghost will emerge from those dark corners to scare me to sleep. Once again, there was no one. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that I was imagining all of this, and none of these incidents were actually happening in real life. I picked up the glass of water I kept near my bed to take a sip. I took the first sip and calmed down a bit. Then I went to take a second sip, just when a drop of something fell in my glass. In that flash of lightning, I saw the water changing into a red color. I immediately looked up and saw Sam was lying on the ceiling staring at me with a devilish grin. He was looking like a creature from another world. Half of his face was rotten with maggots crawling on the surface. He opened his black hollow mouth and said in a demonic voice, "I want my toys back. Those are my Happy Meals," before I could say something. He jumped on me from the ceiling and vomited a pool of blood on my face. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My parents rushed to my room and I hugged my dad and cried for an hour. My parents slept in my room that night. The next morning when I woke up, I told them everything. I don't think they believed a dead kid's ghost was haunting me, but they took me to Sam's house and made me apologize to his parents for stealing his toys. When I returned those Happy Meal toys to Sam's mom, she said in a sobbing voice, "These were Sam's favorite toys. He loved eating at McDonald's just to collect this toy." After that day, I never saw Sam again. I live in Long Island and share an apartment with my best friend, Jill, and I have been besties since high school. We finished college together and now work in the same company as well. People often say we are friends for life, and it's almost impossible to separate us. But I never thought someday our friendship would actually save our lives. It was the beginning of the winter season. Jill and I were coming home after a late shift. Light rainfall was going around, making the atmosphere frostier. We had immense work pressure that day, and the last time we ate was lunch hour. Jill and I both were feeling extremely hungry, so we decided to stop by the McDonald's store nearby. Also at that time of night, McDonald's was our only option. We were driving on the empty streets amidst the chilling cold when we reached the McDonald's outlet. We saw the area was empty. I parked the car near the restaurant and came out. Jill and I were walking. To the store when my eyes went to the dumpster at the corner. A guy wearing a McDonald's uniform was standing there and emptying garbage bags. Suddenly our eyes met and he gave me a very disturbing grin. I turned my face and walked into the restaurant. Needless to say, there were no other customers at this hour. A man was sitting behind the counter watching something on his phone. Jill and I walked to him to order our food. "Hi, we would like to have 2 cheeseburgers, 2 egg McMuffins, and a Coke." Jill said. The man looked at us with surprised eyes as if he wasn't expecting 2 girls at this hour. "Will that be all?" he awkwardly replied. "Yep, that's all," I said. He pointed out to the sitting area and said, "You can sit over there. The food will be ready soon." The guy went inside the kitchen and came back after 5 minutes. We sat down and started to talk. "Hey, did you notice that creepy guy outside?" "Which guy?" "The one near the dumpsters." "I didn't notice anyone." "Sorry, I guess I'm just tired." I couldn't agree more because I was feeling the same way too. 10 minutes went by. The guy behind the counter again got busy on his phone. I was getting impatient because I knew the creepy guy I saw outside was probably the one preparing our food right now. And I was right. Within a few minutes, the same guy came from the kitchen and went to the guy sitting behind the counter. He then whispered something to the counter guy, and they both talked in a low voice. The counter guy then came to us and said, "Ma'am, we have a situation. Looks like we ran out of muffins. Is it possible we can substitute it with some fries?" Jill replied, "Okay, fine, but please make it quick." He thanked us for understanding the situation and went back to the creepy guy. What he did next gave me a huge red flag. The creepy guy smartly walked to the exit door and locked it. Using a key, he then put up the clothes sign and went back to the kitchen. "What's going on?" I said to the guy at the counter. He smiled and replied, "Oh, don't worry, ma'am. It only locks from outside. We're done on the supplies for tonight. You guys are our last customer. But couldn't you have done this locking thing after we left?" "Don't worry, ma'am. Rick and I exit using the back door. That's why we always lock up after the last customer arrives, but as I said, it only locks from outside." Jill and I exchanged looks, and we both were quite freaked out with what just happened. Jill got up and said, "We would like to take our food with us. We had a long, tiring day. Can you just pack it and give it to us?" Suddenly, the man at the counter gave us a suspicious look. "Fine. Wait here. I'll go bring your food." As soon as he went inside the kitchen, I rushed to the exit door and tried to open it. My guess was right. The door was locked. Jill were trapped. Suddenly, the lights went off, resulting in pitch-black darkness. Our heartbeat got faster because we finally understood. These 2 guys had some evil plan. Going in their minds, we took out our phones and I switched on the flashlight. I turned on my flashlight first, but before I could see the surrounding area, my flashlight fell on a pair of hungry eyes. The creepy dumpster guy was standing close to my face. His foul breath was blowing on my face. I froze in fear. I got so scared with this shock that I even forgot to scream. Jill was busy searching for her phone in her bag. "Max, I can't see a thing. Throw the light at me." "Max, what's wrong with?" She didn't finish her sentence because she turned at me and saw me standing face to face with a creepy-looking stranger. She immediately screamed, and the guy behind the counter grabbed her from behind and covered her mouth with his hand. I knew that they were going to take advantage of us in the worst way possible, and no one is coming to save us. At this hour, I don't know where I got the courage from before the other guy could grab me. I kicked him between his legs hard. He fell on the ground, screaming, "Ah, you seeing me fighting back?" Jill got charged up as well. She bit the man's hand, and the man cried in pain and let go of her immediately. But we didn't waste a single second. I picked up my phone and screamed, "Jill, the back door!" We ran towards the back door and luckily found it open. I was in tears. Jill was pale with fear. Somehow we started the car engines and heard those up men screaming, "These, God damn it!" I will never forget the experience of that night. We informed the cops and reported about those freaks. They're in jail right now. But it still scares me when I think, what if only one of us went to McDonald's at night? This happened around 2006. When I was 11 years old, my cousin Aaron was spending the week with my sister and I over summer vacation. At some point during the week, my mom decided to take us all to McDonald's. We ordered and took our food to the back of the McDonald's to sit at a table connected to one of those super long booths along the wall nearest to the bathrooms, sitting on the same booth. but a few tables down was an older man sitting by himself. He was probably in his 60s, a bit overweight, balding, and had huge lens 80s style glasses on. He was wearing a dirty t-shirt with gray sweatpants. We first walked in, I noticed him, but he kept his head down and didn't seem to pay any attention to us, so I kind of blew him off and almost forgot that he was there. My mom had my brother and his car seat by the table and was feeding him French fries. He must have either choked or got sick because he started throwing up all over the place. My mom grabbed him and rushed into the bathroom with him, followed by my sister to help Aaron, and I were left alone at the table. All of a sudden, the old dude looks over at us and starts trying to have a conversation with us. It started with the casual, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And then he said something about hoping my brother was okay, so we politely responded. I think that's all that he wanted to say, but then he immediately started getting weird. He asked our ages, which we told him, and then he started asking our names and where our moms worked. So being kids, we told him that. Also the man then looked down at his phone and said that her mom had just texted him, saying they would be a while in the bathroom, and then he was supposed to bring us home because it was getting late. Although I knew my mom had never even talked to this man once, so even as a kid, I knew something was off. The man then grabbed our hands and said we should hurry at this point. We were practically being dragged outside. We got outside and this man started leading us into an old run-down white van. He opened the back door and said that we could stay in there for the ride. Luckily, just then, some younger guy had spotted us and instantly went over and told the manager what was going on. As this was happening, my mom and my sister also came out of the bathroom, saw what was going on and screamed while running outside to us. At this point, we hadn't gotten in the van yet, but the man was trying to push us in now. Hearing my mom's screams, I instantly started pushing back, trying to keep myself from entering. The guy quickly gives up as a manager, and my mother are fast approaching. The guy gets in the driver's seat and steps on it, with his back door still open. My mom was still yelling at us, and we started crying. We didn't know what to think to this day. This experience still horrifies me. I don't know why me and my cousin were stupid enough to go along with what this guy was saying, but I'm just glad my mom showed up when she did. Do you also believe that everything happens for a reason? I was never one of those people who believed in fate, but that day, hell, I refused to believe that I'm only alive because of the mercy of a psychopath who wasn't in his right mind. My name is Roy, and I was working at McDonald's in Es Cedro during the massacre of '84. But this story is not about that horrible massacre that took the lives of 21 people, but about my experience with the psychopath in the days leading up to it. I was quite young at the time, and a job at McDonald's paid well. It wasn't my destiny to spend my whole life there either. It was a simple routine job that helped me pay the bills. Among the regular customers were James Huberty. He came in almost every day, always alone, always ordering the same thing: a cheeseburger, medium fries, and a Coke. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were laden with paranoia and always made my hair stand on end. Huberty was not an easy man to ignore. He had a haunting presence, a kind of dark aura that seemed to follow him wherever he went. The other employees always kept their distance, glancing nervously at each other whenever he came in. Rumor had it that he had been fired from several jobs and was having problems at home, but no one dared to ask him directly. What bothered me most was the way his eyes roamed the place, as if he was looking for something or someone in every nook and cranny. Huberty was always a paranoid man. He felt that everyone, especially the government, was watching him and even conspiring against him. Huberty had a very bad relationship with all the employees, but they couldn't fire him, since so far he hadn't done anything serious enough to be banned. In any case, all of us who worked there knew that sooner or later he would be. It was only a matter of time before Huberty hurt someone, and to our surprise, he did a lot more than that. When Huberty would come in, I was usually the one who would go to him. I was the one who saw Huberty as a poor man, someone who should be locked up in a mental institution to get the help he needed. I was the only one who wasn't afraid of him, and that's why Huberty came to respect me. Although there were days when his paranoia was so high that he didn't even recognize me. One afternoon, after his usual order, he stared at me. His eyes were two dark wells of distrust and fear. He leaned forward and, in a horror whisper, spoke to me. "Let's get this over with. Tell me the truth. Are you with the government?" I froze for a moment, trying to process the question. James looked more nervous than usual, his face sweaty and his hands shaking. "No, man. I just work here. I don't work with the government, nor do I intend to does. That calm you down? No, because I know you're lying to me seriously. Tell me the truth. And don't lie to me. I know I'm being watched. I know I'm being watched. I can feel it, James. How long have you been coming here? I always treat you the best way and leave you alone to eat. Trust me, I'm not with the government. Okay, it's okay, I believe you." I nodded slowly, not knowing what else to say. James picked up his food and left, but I could understand all of James's gestures. It was obvious that he didn't believe me in the slightest. That day ended normally after lunch. James simply got up and left. That day was quieter, and to my surprise, the next day, he didn't go. We didn't hear from him for a while. Everything was going back to normal at McDonald's until I saw him again a few days past. I finished my shift and went out the back door. There was a quiet afternoon. The sun was starting to go down and the parking lot was almost empty. Suddenly, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. Before I could turn around, I felt a sharp blow to the back of my head that sent me crashing to the ground as I tried to get up. I saw James standing over me, his face marred by uncontrollable rage and fear. He had a baseball bat in his hand. "I trusted you. Why did you lie to me? I know you're with them." "No, James. I swear I'm not the bat." Came down hard, impacting against my arm. I felt a sharp pain, as if it had broken into 1,000 pieces. I screamed, but the parking lot was empty. No one was coming to help me. James continued his attack, his movements increasingly frantic and uncoordinated. Each blow was harder than the last. I could see in his eyes how the rage was leaving, replaced by eyes that showed up utter madness. James was losing his mind. I could see him foaming at the mouth. He was like a rabid animal that was already so focused on hitting me that he wasn't even aiming. He could hit me in the arm, hit me in the leg, hit me in the head and kill me, or even miss and hit the ground. I tried to roll to the side to escape his blow, but he followed me. Raising the bat again and again, I felt every bone in my body break with each impact, and my vision began to blur in the distance. I heard the sound of a car passing by, but no one was stopping. They weren't even noticing what was happening. I recently took a job at McDonald's. A few days back, I was appointed for an overnight shift. My house was close to the McDonald's store, so I was hardly worried about reaching home late. Also, I'm in my late 20s and have been living independently for quite a long time. My work was basically at the front counter. It was 10:30 p.m. already, and there were 4 to 5 people in the restaurant. This is a small outlet of McDonald's, hence very few people work here, especially in night shifts. The one in charge has to take care of things by themselves, though the overnight shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., but our outlet, we hardly get orders after 12 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. So my plan was to lie down on the couch in the resting area after the customers left. Everything was going according to plan. 3 customers paid their bills and left. There was one customer who stood up once, but then sat down again. I asked in a hesitant voice, "Sir, do you need anything?" He looked at me with a very weird smile and shook his head in a no gesture. There was nothing more I could do, so I sat down on the counter seat and started scrolling my YouTube feed with every moment passing by. I could tell the guy was looking at me with wide eyes. He seemed a bit younger to me, probably in his early 20s, but his behavior was becoming very creepy. 2 to 3 times, I stared back at him out of irritation and he awkwardly looked away. I murmured to myself saying, "Jerk, why can't he just leave?" But the guy didn't move 1 inch from his seat. 20 minutes passed away like this. He was done with his food, but still he kept sitting there. At one point I lost my patience and asked him, "Sir, do you need anything more?" The guy looked at me and said, No, thanks. I am good." Now, I can't just tell him to leave randomly because the restaurant is basically open for the entire night. There was nothing else I could do. After 5 minutes more, the guy finally stood up and started to walk towards the counter. I said in my head, "Good Lord, finally he's leaving." After he reached the counter, out of a relieving feeling, I gave him a big smile and started his billing. The guy smiled back at me in a tense way and kept standing there. I handed him over the bill and his credit card when he said something way weird. "Is that a tattoo on your neck?" "I do have a mermaid tattoo on my neck." Sar replied awkwardly, "Yeah, right." The man was supposed to leave, but instead he started chatting with me, which kind of surprised me. He then said, "I am also thinking of getting a tattoo, but haven't found a good tattoo artist yet." "From where did you get yours?" I can't say he was being offensive, but this unnecessary curiosity at that time of the night felt very off-putting. I said in an uninterested tone, "I got it when I was in college, so don't probably remember." I started to arrange the counter, hoping he would leave, but the man still stood there. He then got really close to my face and said, "Hey, I sketched for a hobby. My sketchbook is in my car. Want to come take a look?" I was highly surprised to see his adamant behavior. I said in an irritated tone, "No thanks, I have my duty to finish." The man now grasped my hand and said, "No, you should really come with me. You are anyway free now," and started giving the same tense smile. Now, this move threw me off the hook, I said in an extremely angry voice. "Listen, you freak, I don't want to go with you. If you don't leave right this moment, I will call the owner and there are security cameras all over this place. So, what's it going to be?" And kept staring at him with angry eyes. The man let go of my hand immediately and then walked towards his table. He stood there, facing his back at me for some time. I couldn't tell what he was doing, so I yelled once again, "Did you get what I said?" The guy then turned at me and left the restaurant quietly. As soon as he got out, I went and locked the entrance of the restaurant with my keys. My head was burning like a fireplace. It took me a few seconds to calm down. I decided to report about this creepy customer tomorrow first thing in the morning. The store was finally quiet. I heaved a sigh of relief and went to clean his table. I was picking up his trays when a shadow moved behind me. I turned back and saw the same guy standing outside the door with a fearful face. I was about to burst out this time, but the guy gestured to keep quiet and pointed at the tray in my hand. Before I could understand what the hell he was doing, my eyes went to his tray in my hand. There was a folded napkin on it. As I unfolded the napkin, the blood inside my veins froze in fear. The napkin read, "A man is sitting on the vent above your counter. Don't look. Just come out quietly." I was fucking scared because I don't know what I was supposed to do right now. I have to go to the counter anyway because my phone is there. I slowly took the plate, dumped it into the bin, and started walking towards the counter. As I reached underneath the vent, I grabbed my phone. I know I should not have looked up, but out of curiosity and tension, I couldn't stop myself. As I lifted my head slightly and looked at the vent, my brain stopped working. I saw a pair of terrifying eyes looking right back at me. I screamed like hell and ran for my life. My hands were shaking heavily while I tried to unlock the door with a key. And before I could do so, I heard a huge thud, as if someone fell to the ground from a higher place. I looked back and saw a devilish figure standing on the counter like a frog and making a grunting noise like some hungry animal. I screamed even louder and somehow managed to open the door. As soon as I came out, the guy outside pulled me out and we both slammed the door. The guy already had a shovel in his hand. He blocked the door with that. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. By this time, the evil-looking man started to slam on the door, whispering something inaudible. It was evident from his behavior that he is not in a good shape. The man was acting like a crazy person. He then started to ransack the entire McDonald's store like a wolf caught inside a cage. I immediately called the cops and the owner. The guy looked at me and said, I am Alan, and I am sorry. But trust me, I didn't mean to scare you. I was ready to leave when I realized I had forgotten my phone at home. Just then, my eyes went to the vent above your computer, and I saw a human figure standing there and looking at you. There was no other way for me to let you know about this because I myself had no idea if this person had weapons with them or not. Alan took a pause and started to breathe heavily. I broke into tears, realizing how horrible it would have been if Alan actually left me alone all this entire night with this crazy person. The cops came and arrested the man in the vent. It came to know that it was a homeless person who somehow sneaked into the restaurant. I am sure this person had some very bad intentions, and also his state of mind was really messed up, which I could tell from his reaction after getting caught. So, Alan, thank you again for saving my life that day, even though I was being really rude to you. And I just want to say to the man leaving in the event of McDonald's, may we never ever meet again. Hi, I am Eddie. I am currently in junior high. I have two friends named Max and Jim. They are not only my school friends, we live in the same locality too. Max has a habit of mocking people. I know it's not nice, but he sometimes ends up bullying school kids. We often told him to change his behavior, but he ignored our advice. As he has always been a good friend by stepping up in our troubled times, we tolerated his mocking behavior so far, until this recent incident took place. Last month, we went to the city mall to have some fun. After playing video games in the game zone, we all got hungry and decided to grab a bite at McDonald's. After entering the store, we ordered some fries and burgers and sat down at a nearby table. It was probably some special offer day. There were lots of combos and discounts going on the food items. There was also a man dressed as the McDonald Joker standing at the entrance, welcoming the guests inside. The Joker was making funny faces and giving balloons to little kids. Jim said, "Remember when Max was a little kid? He once started crying seeing a McDonald's Joker. I still recall his freaked out face, and we started to laugh. The joke was made in a very light tone, but Max didn't take it easy. Max replied, "I was scared, you jackass. I was annoyed to see a guy dressed in a bizarre way hopping like a monkey." Jim said, "Yeah, right," as if we weren't there. I didn't want to start a fight, so I shifted the conversation onto some other topic. We finished our meal and got up to pay. While we were leaving the store, we came near the Joker standing at the gateway. The Joker offered us 3 balloons, probably out of a kind gesture, but Max crossed his limit like always. He busted one of the 3 balloons and replied, "Do I seem like a little kid to you? And you know, you are not even funny, douchebag." I saw the Joker's face changing immediately. His eyes opened widely and a grin appeared. I could tell from the Joker's face that he held back his anger. Maybe he did so because it was a public place, or to save his job, and said in a squeaky voice, "I'll see you again." Max was going to say something more, but this time I grabbed his hand. We left McDonald's immediately. After coming out of the mall, I hurled on Max saying, "What's your problem, dude? We were just joking." Jim agreed with me and said, "Yeah, Max, this is really not the way to talk to people, you know?" Max obviously showed us attitude and left on his own. Jim and I stood there for a while, seeing Max walking in the opposite direction. Jim then said, "Let's go, Drake. He will come back once he cools off." We returned to our houses too. The next day at school, Jim and I were talking in the hallway. Suddenly, Max came and patted our backs. We gave him an awkward smile. Max said in a carefree tone, "Okay, okay. I am sorry. Now, can we go for lunch?" The matter got resolved and we went for lunch. We decided to go to the amusement park that put up a weekend fair for the town people. There were rides in various stalls. We were enjoying the fair when a corner of the ground caught my attention. There was a small truck of McDonald's at the fair, selling burgers and fries at the fair. I excitedly told Jim and Max, "Hey, look, let's go grab some snacks from there before leaving for home." We 3 walked towards the cart and bought our food. As soon as we turned back, I got goosebumps. Joker guy was standing in front of us with a creepy smile. We looked at each other's faces in surprise and discomfort. The Joker then turned to Max and said, well, we meet again. I could tell from Max's face that he was a bit freaked out. He said in a hesitant voice, yeah, whatever. Come on, guys. It's time to go home. We started to walk towards the exit of the park. Jim said in a panicked voice, is he still looking at us? I turned back and saw the Joker smiling. I said in an awkward voice, let's just keep walking. After reaching the main gate, we all turned back, but the Joker was not there anymore. Max replied, what a creep. I would have been relieved if the night ended this way. The townspeople were busy at the fair, so most of the streets were empty. The moonlight and crickets chirping around made the walk even scarier. The only thing going on in my mind was this creepy encounter. I couldn't help but think that it was the same guy from the mall that day because he remembered us. My heart was hoping that he wasn't following us. We were constantly checking our back, but apart from the three of us, there wasn't a single person on the road. We took a left turn for a shortcut, which led to a narrow alley joining our neighborhood and the main streets together. As we turned into the alley, we heard footsteps. We immediately turned back but didn't see anyone. Needless to say, we started to freak out now and decided to walk even faster. But as soon as we turned forward, our heart stopped beating. There was a figure dressed in McDonald's Joker's clothes obstructing our way. There was a 10 to 15 hands distance between us and him. He giggled and said, what did you call me that day? Now Max was covered in sweat. He said in a stuttering voice, don't you dare hurt us, you freak. Step out of our way or I will. The Joker replied in the same chuckling tone. Or you will what? And started laughing like a maniac. Jim and I were equally freaked out, but we didn't see any weapons with this guy. We were just thinking what our next move should be when Max did something extremely dangerous. He picked up an empty beer bottle lying in the alley and threw it on the Joker's face. The bottle hit so hard on his face that it shattered into pieces. I screamed in horror, saying, oh God, Max, what have you done? Max said in a firm voice. How's that, you fucking creep? The Joker stood there silently. He didn't scream, didn't walk away. He stood there like a statue and started to sob like a child. Blood was dripping from his forehead. I said in a tensed voice, please let us take you to the hospital. It's all a misunderstanding. Listen. But the Joker lifted his face, and his sobbing turned into psychotic laughter. He then picked up some of the broken glass from the ground and said in a spine-chilling voice, you want to see something funny? Maximum. Our eyes got wide open. Our hearts were beating like a wild horse. We had no clue what he is up to now. Max was trembling in terror. His eyes were fixed at the Joker. The Joker then shoved the broken glass inside his mouth and started chewing. I don't know how I should explain this, but that was the most frightening sight I might be going to witness in my life. The sound of broken glass getting smashed by his teeth and the flesh ravaged by the sharp pieces of glass made my heart skip to my throat. Blood was dripping from his mouth, but he kept chewing as if it were just mere food. He then started to laugh and say, am I funny for you now? Am I, Max? Jim said in a terrified voice. Guys, run, run! We started running towards the direction of the fair again. We didn't look back because the Joker's laughter was still coming from our back. Gasping and panting, we reached near the fair. A few local people rushed towards us. Max was in tears, and we were completely freaked out. Our parents were informed, and we safely reached home. My dad filed a complaint at the police station. They still haven't caught the guy. The cops asked the McDonald's owner about the Joker's whereabouts. The owner said that they only had his number, but the number is in switched off mode till now. I wonder, where is this guy now? Hi, I am Sarah. I was raised in a foster home with 3 other children. Needless to say, an orphan's childhood can get pretty tough comparing to other kids sometimes. Miss Lestrange, who took care of us, was not a very nice lady. She used to starve us and compel us to work chores in local stores to make her money. We lived in a dingy suburb where people hardly cared about each other. The standard of living in our locality wasn't healthy at all. Homeless people were living all on the alleys, and all sorts of crimes were happening every now and then. There was a boy named Robbie who also lived with me. Robbie and I were of the same age back then. Whenever we saved money for ourselves, we used to go to the local McDonald's shops secretly. One day, Robbie and I were sitting at McDonald's waiting for our food to arrive. Suddenly, Robbie said, "Look, it's him." He pointed towards a table nearby. There was a tall, bony guy sitting at the table. I have seen that guy earlier from our locality. He looked at us with a serious face and then again got busy on his phone. I told Robbie in a low voice, "Do you think he's going to tell Miss Lestrange about us?" Robbie laughed and replied, "Come on, Sarah. He's a drug dealer. He's way busier than you and me." Even though we had a tough life, Robbie has always been a cheerful boy. It wasn't evident that this guy was into dealing drugs, but we saw him picked up by cops many times from our living room window. When we finished our meal, we headed back home. A week passed and Miss Lestrange fell ill due to fever, so we were all relieved from her torture for a while. We didn't have to pay her for a week, as her boyfriend used to come and take care of her for some hours every day. That man was nice to us. One night, everyone was sleeping and Robbie and I ate very little that day. The two other kids were a lot younger than us, so we gave most of our food to them. Around 12 a.m., Robbie woke me up and said, "Sarah, I am feeling very hungry. Let's go to the McDonald's shop nearby." Eating too much junk food wasn't good, bud. McDonald's is the only food store that is open 24/7. It was in our budget, too. I got up from the bed and we sneaked out of the house. The suburb is more prone to criminal activity at this hour, but we had no other ways. We chose to walk from the middle of the street to avoid any dark corner. Many kids in our area get abducted and trafficked by criminal gangs. After a trouble-free 10 minutes walk, we reached the McDonald's store. The store had no other customers. We entered and walked towards the counter. "Was no one at the counter as well?" Robbie said in a low voice. "Anyone here to take our order?" Suddenly a deep, coarse voice came from the back. "What do you kids need?" The voice shook us immediately, and we turned around in fear. It was that bony, tall guy wearing a McDonald's employee costume. He probably went out for smoke because as soon as he entered the shop, a foul smell of burnt cigarettes grabbed the air. I said in a hesitant voice, We would like to..." The guy slowly walked towards the counter and handed us the menu chart. I got a bit scared, so I fumbled. Robbie ordered some burgers and fries. The guy told us, "Go sit there. I'll bring over the food." We quietly went to sit at the table near the corner. Robbie started saying, "God knows when we'll be able to get out of this place. Sometimes I feel really angry with my parents who left me on the road to living a life like this." The guy was wearing a McDonald's cap, so I couldn't see his eyes, but it felt like he was listening to our talks. After a few more minutes, the guy brought us the food with 2 cups of Sprites and said, "Eat, the food is on me." Robbie and I were not at all ready for such a kind gesture from a guy like that, but it felt like we ended up assuming a lot of negative things about people before we really know them. We finished our meal and stood up to leave. The guy came to take our plates and said, "How many of you live with Miss Lestrange?" Robbie said, "Right now there's 4 of us, but there was a girl of 16 years ago. Miss Lestrange says she ran away. She was pregnant too." The guy's face changed color immediately, and his voice got angry too. He said, "Millie didn't run away. That old hag killed her." Even though we were 10 years old, we knew what he meant, and our face turned pale. I could tell from his angry eyes that he hated Miss Lestrange the most. He then said a very surprising thing, which creeped both of us. He took off his cap and said with a firm voice, "Do you guys want to get out of here? Do you want her to get punished for what she does to you?" I don't know why tears rolled down my eyes, and Robbie replied in a sad face, "She is never nice to us." "Where can we go?" The guy didn't say anything. He went back to the computer and told us to go home. That entire night, I couldn't sleep. Robbie asked me the next day, "Do you think that McDonald guy can help us?" I looked at him with worried eyes and said, "Robbie, are you insane? That guy is a criminal himself. What if we get into more problems because of him?" Robbie nodded his head, and we headed out for work that day. Around 5 p.m., we were coming back. The porch light of our house was visible from the streets. In the light, I saw a McDonald's guy handing over food to Ms. Lestrange, who recovered a bit by this time. She took the food and paid the guy. As we came close to the house, we realized it was that same bony guy. He smirked at us and left. I ran inside with Robbie and asked Ms. Lestrange what was he doing here, to which she replied in a very irritated manner, "Delivering food. Are you blind?" I didn't say anything more. She then sat down on the living room couch and started eating her burger while watching TV. I came back to my room. Everything was going as usual when suddenly a younger boy named Joe started crying, saying, "Miss Lestrange is coughing blood." Robbie and I immediately heard that and ran downstairs. It was a vicious sight to witness for two 10-year-olds and two 6-year-olds. We stood there with white, gasping eyes and saw Miss Lestrange spitting blood all over the couch while choking with food inside her mouth. She was coughing terribly, as if not being able to breathe. What happened next was definitely not our plan. But till today, whenever Robbie and I discuss that incident, he tells me it happened for our own good. Miss Lestrange looked at us and said in a choking voice, Call 911. Call 911. I was about to run towards the phone when Robbie grabbed my hand tightly. I said in a tense voice, "What are you doing? You must call for help." He pulled my hand even tighter and said, "Take Joe and Kitty to their rooms right now." I couldn't believe it was coming out of Robbie's mouth, I said in a horrified voice. "But Robbie, she is going to die." He screamed at me this time and said, "Do as I said." Out of panic and shock, I did what he said. As we walked out of the room, we heard the choking sound become more intense and louder. I put Joe and Kitty to sleep, saying, "We are going to take Miss Lestrange to the hospital." Then I rushed back to the living room and saw Robbie standing at the doorway, talking to someone. I peeked to see who it was, and yes, it was the guy who delivered her food from McDonald's. Robbie came to me and said, "We are going to take her to the hospital. You stay here with the kids." Then he came inside to pick up Miss Lestrange. Suddenly, my eyes went to the name tag of this guy, and his name read Mark Davis. They went out with Miss Lestrange, who wasn't responding at all. Robbie came back the next morning. Mark Davis shifted to our house, and he took care of us until we moved out on our own. He still lives there, and Robbie visits him often. I don't know what happened to Miss Lestrange, and I never asked them. Our life got a bit easier after she went away. Today is my 20th birthday, and Robbie has sent me a beautiful birthday cake and some gifts online with his first salary. He is the nicest friend one can have. I was going to throw away the parcel box just when my eyes went on the bill. There was a small note written on it. "Happy birthday, Sarah. A small gift from your friend, Robert Davis." It all started at the beginning of June. I just finished high school. But as it turned out, I was not that academically gifted. When it came to schoolwork, I would much rather hang out with my friends than focus on the homework. And the result of this was, I wouldn't have a chance to go to college. But I didn't want to go anyway. I just wanted to work and make my own money. During that time, I found several places around town that would hire someone who had just finished high school. But I wasn't keen on working at a fast food restaurant or inflating tires at the local tire shop. It wasn't that I didn't like to work, but the pay was lousy in my mind. I needed to make some serious cash. I asked around for job opportunities that paid well over a minimum wage. Unfortunately, no one had a lead, so I just had to take the first job I found, which was one at McDonald's. I'm not saying that working there was bad or anything, but I just had a different vision in my mind. Anyway, I went in, talked to the manager, and before I knew it, I got a uniform and was expected to work the next morning. Oh God, I hate myself. I said while looking in the mirror early in the morning. I was all dressed up in that stupid uniform, wearing that stupid hat, but that's what I had to do. I had no choice. In about half an hour, there I was. I walked inside and went into the back to meet with the manager. "Good morning," she said, while sipping on her black coffee, giving me a smile that made me contemplate my life. "Morning," I responded with a tired look on my face. The next thing I knew, she grabbed my hand. I didn't know what was going on, but she started showing me around the place. Then she explained my duties. I was in the back. I had to make the fries glamorous. I said while inhaling the delicious smell of fried goodness. I had a coffee before we opened and, bam, I was working. The first customer came in, and shortly thereafter, a whole bunch of them arrived. "What's up with that guy?" I asked one of my colleagues while I was taking out the fries. "Oh, him. He walks in here every day and bakes for food, but we all know he just throws it away. He wants money to get drunk," Maria told me. As I was working, the guy came into the McDonald's. He was wearing old, torn clothes. He had long, greasy hair and a very bushy beard. "Give me some fries." I heard I didn't want to look at him. "Give me some fries, kid," he yelled. I turned my head to the right and he was staring right at me. I got back to what I was doing, and fortunately, security came and escorted him outside. He then walked away and didn't come back for the rest of the day. Everyone seemed to know him, and they weren't bothered by him that much. But in that second, when I turned my head and looked into his eyes, I saw something strange. It was like he had something personal towards me. He had the same look my bullies used to have back in middle school. Anyway, as the day went on, nothing interesting happened. I just had my head so deep in those fries that I almost forgot to go home on closing time. "See you tomorrow," Rookie, my manager, told me while I walked out the door with the same smile she had that morning. "Yeah, see you," I responded, but all I wanted to do was to get out of there. I was so tired and my feet hurt from standing all day. As soon as I got home, I took a shower and went straight to bed the next morning. As I arrived at work, the same smile greeted me. "I guess I'll have to get used to this," I said to myself while I smiled back at the manager. A couple of hours later, the same guy came in again. He demanded fries, and he kept his eyes on me. "Come on, sir. You have to leave the store," my manager said. But he did something that no one thought would be possible. Pushed the manager, making her fall on the floor. Right there in front of everyone, security quickly came and dragged the man outside while he was being forced towards the exit. He continued to say, "I'll get you, kid. I want my fries." "You're gonna pay," with an evil look on his face. It gave me the creeps, and I told this to my colleague. She said she'd never seen him do something like this. He wasn't violent. All that he would normally do was come inside and ask for food, then leave without the security being involved. "I guess he has something personal towards you," she told me while laughing and patting me on the back. But I didn't laugh. I was freaked out. The rest of my shift ended without any interruptions. But as soon as I got outside in the parking lot, I felt eyes on me. I looked left and right, but there wasn't anyone there. It was weirdly quiet. I hopped on the bus and went home for the entirety of the bus ride. I smelled something awful. I didn't know where it came from, but someone in that bus didn't shower for quite a while before I knew it. I was at my front door while I was searching for my keys. I felt a hand grabbing me from behind. I got pulled back and fell on my stairs, hitting my head on the pavement. "Now I got you," I heard while still trying to get myself back together. After the fall, I opened my eyes, and there he was, the homeless guy who had his foot on my chest, making it difficult for me to breathe. "Get off," I yelled, but he continued to stare into my eyes with that evil look. I managed to get his foot away and tried to escape, but he caught up and tackled me. He started raining punches, and I was trying so hard to protect myself, but I wasn't a fighter. My vision started to get blurry, and a loud ringing started to impair my hearing. I guess I was getting beaten up pretty badly. "Hey," I heard it was a neighbor of mine. He saw the entire scene and came to help get off of him. He yelled. The homeless guy got up and took out a knife. Then, without saying anything, he attacked my neighbor. Everything happened so fast, by the time I got up, the two men were laying on the grass. "Are you okay?" I asked my neighbor while going to check on him. He said he was fine, but a blood stain confirmed. Otherwise, I called an ambulance and they quickly took him to the hospital, where he made a quick recovery by the time the ambulance and police got there. The homeless guy was gone. He too left some blood stains on the grass. But there wasn't any sign of him. He didn't come to the McDonald's after that incident. I haven't seen him ever since. I just hope that even if he's still alive, he stays away from me. Cover my shift, please. I looked at Mike inside. Sure, I don't have anything to do tonight anyway. I was supposed to get off work in about 30 minutes, but it meant that I'd have to stay for the night shift. Now it was hard to resist Mike's baby blue eyes. I worked at McDonald's and was grateful for my job. It came at the time when I was struggling to pay my bills. My parents couldn't cater to my every need, so I had to figure out a way myself. I was in college, but we were on a break at the moment, so it meant I didn't have to rush back to school immediately after my job. I could be out in more hours. Mike waved at me as he hurried out, probably off to some date with his girlfriend. They've been together for about 3 months, and we're the cutest thing ever. I took orders as quickly as I could and gave them out. Just as fast, I wanted to go home and sleep at 20. There wasn't a lot I was doing besides school. I heard that the world outside school could be brutal, so I tried to take care of myself whenever I could. Whoever was on the last shift was in charge of walking up the restaurant, and I guessed that it was my job to do. Now I looked at the time and saw that it was 8:30. I sighed and continued answering the trickle of customers that came in. Finally, the last group of customers left, and I started to wipe the tables before I left. It was around 9. I just finished cleaning the last one. When the front door opened, I turned around to tell the person that we had closed when I suddenly stopped. It was a big man, and his face looked scary. He had 3 piercings above his right eyebrow and a bushy beard. His eyes looked so small compared to the rest of his face. I swallowed and walked to him, taking small steps. "I'm sorry, but we're already closed." He looked at me, then surveyed the rest of the restaurant after nodding to himself. He went to sit down at the table. "I just cleaned. I only want to stay here for a while. When you're about to leave, I'll go," he said. He looked like he was anxious. I retreated quietly and nodded to him. I couldn't exactly tell him no. I went back to the cleaning and saw that he was looking nervous, glancing at the door. Every now and then I wondered if he was avoiding something or maybe just needed a place to stay for a while. I wasn't sure it was safe being alone with someone I knew nothing about, especially when it turns out that he's not a customer. I finished finally and was about to go to him to tell him I was about to lock up when I heard a noise at the front door. His eyes went to mine, and I watched as he drew a gun from the waistband of his pants. I screamed and ran to the counter. The front door got kicked open, and 2 men stormed in. "Where is he?" One of them yelled before he sighted the man and charged for him. The man fired a shot into the ceiling, and the other men dove to the floor. I heard them groan as they hit the floor. It didn't sound like anyone had gotten shot. I cowered behind the counter and cursed silently. My phone was in the locker at the employees' room, so there was no way to call the police. I covered my ears with my hands and tried to make myself as unnoticeable as possible. I knew they couldn't see me behind the counter, and I hoped they forgot that I was there. A chair scraped at the floor, and I carefully peeked out. The first man was on the floor with the 2 men standing over him. His gun was somewhere else on the floor, and he pleaded with them. "Wait, just give me more time. I'll get the money. I promise." The man yelled, his eyes widening in panic. "Shut up." The other man shot him in the chest and looked up at the sound of my gasp. "Oh," I whispered. I ran through the back door, my Converse skidding on the floor. They were right behind me, and I knew that they wanted to eliminate me so that I wouldn't let it out, that they just killed someone. My heart was beating erratically, and fear courses through my veins. Never in my life did I think I would be in such a situation. The street was dark, but I could make out a few people just up ahead. If I could reach them in time, they should be able to offer help. "Please help me," I yelled when I got within earshot. The men behind me stopped when they noticed the people up ahead, and I looked back to see them running in the other direction. I pointed towards them. "Those men just killed someone." I gasped out, trying to catch my breath, and they were about to kill me too. My body started to tremble when I realized the enormity of the situation. If they had caught up with me, I would have been dead. The people I had run up to quickly called the cops, choosing to wait with me as I narrated what happened. We walked back to McDonald's together. And saw that the man was still there, blood pooling under him. His eyes were closed, but he appeared to still be breathing. I was still in shock. What had started out as a pleasant night took a sinister turn. The cops arrived and took control of the situation. An ambulance was called for the man on the floor, and he was rushed to the hospital. They claimed he was in a critical condition. The cops interrogated me and made me describe the men to great detail. It wasn't hard for me to do, because I still remembered their faces. Vividly, the one that had shot the man was of average height and was bald. The other one was a bit taller and had a lanky frame. The cops promised to get in touch with me if they needed my help. Frankly, all I wanted to do was to go home and sleep. The night has been exhausting for me. I got dropped off at my apartment, a dingy thing in the middle of my area. I went straight to my room and lied down on my bed. I tried to sleep, but my attempts were unsuccessful. I kept replaying the moment when the man got shot. It was one thing to watch it happen on TV. It was another thing to see it happen right in front of me. My body still had slight tremors. I had never felt as scared as I did when I was being chased by those men, and it felt like they were going to catch up to me. I finally fell asleep and decided that I would never take the night shift ever again. I was young and fresh out of high school. I needed work, so I sent in resumes to all sort of entry-level positions. I got a few responses. I settled on McDonald's because it was an easy commute. Plus, the employee discount was pretty cool. The only position they had was a night shift 10 p.m. to a.m. I'm fine with that because I was already a night owl. The first few days working there were fine. I wasn't working the counter or anything, just doing back-end stuff, and clean up our building was in a little strip mall off a highway exit. It's the only place there that's open at night, but we get a decent amount of customers, most of which go through the drive-thru on the Friday of my second week working there. Or maybe it was a really early Saturday morning at that point. I'm not sure, it was just late. I remember I was grabbing the stacked trays from the lobby when someone walked in through the doors. It was a woman. She was really tall and pretty, made up super fancy in a long dress with high heels. She was wearing a big hat, too eccentric. Not your average McDonald's customer. But what was weird was that I never saw a car pull up. We have a full view of the parking lot from the window, but no car ever dropped her off. She must have walked here. I smiled at her as I walked by and headed behind the counter. I bent down to restack the trays below, expecting my co-workers standing at the register to serve her. He didn't say anything though, and after I'd finished, I stood up to find out why the girl wasn't ordering anything. But she wasn't there. When I looked up, I never heard the door open. She was just gone. I asked the guy on the till where the girl went, and he replied, "Who?" I said, "The girl with the hat," and he just looked at me like I was dumb, telling me he had no clue who I was talking about. So I tried to rationalize it, deciding she had probably stepped in the door, took a look at our grubby menu, and left. But something was weird about the whole thing. It didn't really make sense why someone who looked and dressed like that would be at a random McDonald's in the middle of the night, whatever the shift went on normally, for the next hour. Then I remember taking a break after cleaning the toilets. I sat down on a chair in the back near the kitchen when I heard heels clicking on the floor. It was quite audible, louder than if someone was just walking. It sounded like stomping sort of swipe here out into the lobby. My coworker was gone from the front. I figured he went to take his break. But you know who? I do see that same woman. Only this time someone was with her. A man. He wore a tuxedo with fancy black shoes. They were dancing together like full-on ballroom dancing in the lobby, swinging back and forth. It was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen. I remember watching them for a bit, mesmerized before I took my place behind the register. I said something along the lines of, can I help you? They both looked at me at the same time as they stared. I felt a hand grabbed my shoulder with a firm grip. Instinctually, I turned around. No one was there. I knew someone had touched me, but there wasn't anyone, so I spun back to the lobby where the people were to find them both gone. The man and the woman had just vanished once again. I didn't hear doors open or close. I didn't hear their fancy shoes skid on the floor. They were just there 1 minute and gone the next for the rest of the night. Only a few small things happened at one point. I walked by the washrooms on my way to do something to find both doors swinging. The male and female ones, like someone had just crashed through both of them. A little while later, I remember looking for something on the shelves in the back near the employee entrance, and something banged on the door hard. Something heavy hit it, and only once I remember opening it, looking around and seeing no one. After that, the shift was regular, really not much to say. I was really happy when I finally got off, though. The first bits of sunlight had just begun to come over the horizon as I left for my car. I was punching out 10 minutes before I was supposed to, but I didn't think the people coming in would care as I hit the parking lot. Though I see a car, it looked like a small limousine. It was just sitting there in front of the restaurant through the light from the street lamp. I could make out the doors opening. 2 people got out, one on each side of the car. It was the man and the woman I'd seen before. The same people that were dancing, only their appearance had changed. Their clothes seemed torn and ragged. I could see the woman's dress clearly because it was white. It was covered in dirt with holes and tears, and their faces were terrifying. Their skin was bleach white, and their eyes, which were previously normal, were this beady black, like oversized bugs were looking at me. I stood there frozen as I looked at them. Then the man spoke in a deep, filtered voice that seemed to echo from... All around me, shaking my head, was all I could muster without another word. The 2 people, if you can call them that, got into their car, shut the doors and pulled away. None of their lights were on. I watched wide-eyed as the limo drove down the road before disappearing into the darkness of the early morning. Back in the late 90s, I used to have a serious drug problem. I was living in Las Vegas at the time, and after snorting my entire stash of coke, I would party, pass out, wake up, jack some cars, sell them, spend some money on food, and the rest would go to my dealer, and then I would snort again and repeat the entire process. One night in July, I broke into a panel van without windows. It was parked alone outside of a rat-infested motel. My gut told me that I should check the back before I drove away, but my mind was on my next fix, and I just floored it. As soon as I got the engine started, I drove about an hour away into an isolated area of the desert where I would meet my contact, who would check out the car, pay me in cash, and then drop me off at the nearest street corner. Once I put the van in park, I decided to check out the back. I figured there might be some tools or something back there that I could pawn for more cash. The back of the van was padlocked shut, which should have been my first clue, because when I smashed it open with my crowbar, I heard a high-pitched wailing from inside. I turned on my flashlight and my stomach dropped. 4 Hispanic children, 2 boys and 2 girls, were tied up and gagged, lying on a handful of filthy cushions. They were all in tears and staring at me in absolute horror. I dropped the crowbar and backed away from the van. A few steps, this was bad, really bad. I didn't know what to do. I had clearly stolen the van from a kidnapper or a human trafficker, and they would be looking to recover it and likely shoot the who took it from them. I decided not to call my contact. I knew him pretty well, and I was fairly certain that he would either kill the kids and dump their bodies in the desert or shoot me for this up. I made a snap decision. I climbed in the van and explained to them in both English and Spanish. I knew that I wasn't going to hurt them. I engaged them and cut the bonds around their wrists, but I left their ankles tied. I couldn't risk them running off. I felt sick to my stomach with heartbroken guilt when I saw the welts around their hands. The stench of urine and sweat was heavy in the air. I climbed back in the driver's seat, drove back out of the desert, and at the first service stop I pulled in and parked. I went inside and bought 4 bottles of water and as many bags of snacks that I could afford. I carefully opened the back of the van and tossed the bag inside. Then I closed it again and walked across the lot. I made an anonymous phone call to the police from a payphone and then walked to the next service station where I had a friend come pick me up. After that night, I had my friend buy me a bus ticket to Texas, where I had an older brother who let me stay on his couch. I got clean and I ultimately turned my life around. I got an honest job and I now have my own family and my own home. I remember being so relieved when I heard on the news that the kids had been found and were returned to their families in Mexico. You never know when life will give you a test like that and a chance to prove your character. I like to think that those kids helped me as much as I helped them.